Fake? Impossible? Nope. The insane truth about me that nobody believes. I built a 13-foot-tall T-Rex with Christopher Walken's head, and New York Magazine called it highbrow and brilliant. My dad's name is Luigi, and my uncle's name is Mario. They're brothers. Oh, and my dad, but not my uncle, is also a plumber. I grew up on the wrong side of the river and was considered by all to be the town loser, and went to work as a janitor while still in high school. Then, in my 40s, I set a goal for myself, while still working full-time, to take one class at a time until I either graduated or died, whichever came first. At age 49, I finished my Bachelor's of Science degree, at age 52, my MBA, and at age 61, my PhD. Never let the arrogant elitists define who you are or what you can be. I died first and then was born. During the cesarean to bring me into the world, there was some pretty major complication on my mother's end. She started bleeding pretty badly internally, and I was submerged in red and couldn't breathe. When I was removed, the doctors tried to get me breathing, but couldn't. I was declared dead. My mother was still unconscious, but my dad was brought in to say goodbye to me. He held me in his arms and was saying goodbye, when out of nowhere I started coughing up red and screaming as babies do. Apparently, it was the weirdest moment in my dad's life, being abjectly terrified and overwhelmed with the joy that I was alive. It's my favorite story to tell, because weirdly it takes some pressures off on birthdays. I don't do well with too much attention by family or friends, but celebrating my death day doesn't bring people the same connotations. My great-grandma ran a brothel back at the turn of the 20th century. She was Algonquin, and people were pretty racist back then, so she had a pretty hard time getting business. Since it was a coastal town in Maine, she bought up a couple of leaky old rowboats and would load them up with working girls and booze and row them out to the ships at night. When ships came into port, most of the crew would get shore leave and hit the bars and brothels in town, but they always had to leave a few sailors on the ship to keep an eye on it. My great-grandmother figured those guys had money too and probably felt left out. She basically set up water-based lot lizards, or Uber hoes. My grandpa and his sisters grew up in the brothel and nobody would talk to them or socialize with them. My grandpa met my grandma picking green beans for a local farmer. They fell in love. When they wanted to get married, they had to leave the state to get away from her family, who were utterly disgusted that she would marry the son of a madam. So they ran off to Detroit because General Motors were hiring, and that's how my family came to Michigan. I know it's completely plausible, but for some reason, the hard left turn of going to work in the motor industry was the most jarring part of this story. But good on them for making a life for themselves outside the judgment of her family. I wonder if they had any contact with your grandpap's family or if they cut him off too. I never graduated high school, but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled, and my mum never went through the legal steps to actually get me a real diploma, so she made one in Photoshop that was then used to get me into this podunk community college that didn't verify it. From there, I got my associate's degree, which I then used to get into a decent university where I got my bachelor's. I homeschooled and didn't have a legit transcript when I applied for college. I made one on my computer, and they accepted it. I was shocked. I am allergic to lettuce, like I carry an EpiPen allergic. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts and hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunkmobile. In Minnesota in the 70s, I was 16, taking my driver's test, nervous as all heck. A highway patrol officer was the road tester back then, which was even more nerve-wracking. But I thought I was doing pretty good the whole time because I had lots of practice with my parents. Then, towards the end of the driving test, I was at a T intersection across from a hospital, and I was hesitant to turn onto the road because traffic was busy. I could tell the officer was getting a little impatient, but he was nicely telling me to be a little aggressive. Suddenly, at the hospital across from us, somebody pushed out a screen from a window on the 3rd floor, a psych ward. A woman jumped out the window onto the garage roof underneath and then jumped to the ground and ran across the road right by us. The officer had me turn around, I was in my mum's car, and chase the girl through the neighborhood. When I'd pull up to a stop sign during the chase, he'd say, "Go, go, go, just go through it!" After a while, when she started to get away, he gave up with me being the chase driver and told me to head back to the DMV office. I was a complete shaking mess at this point, ready to accept the fact that I wouldn't get a license anytime soon. Devastating for a 16-year-old boy. He grabbed my score sheet and said, "You passed," and handed it to me. I got an 88 score. He ran to his highway patrol car and tore off to continue the chase. I went into the office a complete mess. My mum was already really nervous because we were gone so long, and then she saw me looking like a ghost. She asked, "What happened?" I told her I passed and then told her the story on the way home. She wasn't amused and pretty teed off at the highway patrol guy. When I tell the story, I say, "No BS, just ask my mum." My great-grandfather worked in the textile business and started importing rayon fabric from Japan in the late 60s and 70s. Keep in mind this was during the early days of synthetic fabrics, and traveling to Japan wasn't all that common. On a business trip, he met some Japanese businessmen who were selling newly designed transistor radios. His contacts wanted to set up an exclusive import agreement for their electronics to North America. But my great-grandfather declined because how many of those radios could you possibly sell? Turns out that was a short-sighted business decision because that company was called Sony Electronics. He turned down the exclusive import contract for Sony. On the other side of the family, my Canadian relatives walked away from 100 acres of land in Alberta during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. They decided it wasn't worth paying the taxes on their land. Turns out that land was right in the heart of the Alberta oil deposits. Also, on my mother's side of the family, they used to have a citrus orchard near Los Angeles. They sold it cheap to some land developers. That farm was right at Hollywood and Vine. So my family on both sides is bad at seeing long-term investments. I took my mother for a surprise trip to New York City. She got married to my father there in '68. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the kind of thing you'd do for the weekend. And therefore, my mum packed her bag and bought her passport. We got to the airport and I said, "Surprise! We're going to New York!" And she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived on our first morning, I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And she said, "When I was last here in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so I'd like to go to the top of them." "Your wish is my command," I said, and off we went to the World Trade Center. That was the afternoon of September 10th, 2001. Suffice to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out of the window at around 8 a.m. the next morning. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple of TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone to leave. A kid ended up leaving and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple of minutes later, the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. Probably played for like 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk on my birthday. Once in college, I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I'd help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head, but I kept my calm outwardly and said, "No, but you can teach me." I worked in IT for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. I found out my father wasn't my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and traits. I raised my hand thinking I was a smart aleck. "Your chart isn't accurate. My dad has AB negative and I'm O positive." My teacher said, "I think your mom has some explaining to do." And we all chuckled. Turned out he wasn't my father. My husband, I'm 30 by the way, who's been my best friend since I was 7. He was the new kid at school and I walked up to him and said, "We are going to be best friends." He said, "No we aren't, leave me alone." I bugged him every day for 2 weeks before he finally said, "If I'll be your friend, will you shut up about it?" And we were married 20 years later. I proved his butt wrong. I saw the former Prime Minister of Poland in his underwear. It is wild that you just posted that with zero context and didn't even provide any explanation in the comments following that. Honestly, I kind of respect the way you just threw that into the world, dropped the mic and walked off, leaving us with a sense of curiosity and faint longing. A horse threw me in the air when I was a child, but I wasn't on his back. He grabbed the skin of my back with his teeth and yeeted me. God, horses are jerks. I had one bite my back and stomp on me. My mom didn't believe me until she saw the teeth marks later. My dad kidnapped me and took me to Singapore for very malicious purposes. I'm sure you could imagine. I was 15 and my dad literally had fake documents and suitcases filled with random clothes. When we got there, we went to a sketchy hotel, and after 15 minutes, he went to the bar, and a bit after that, some guy just walked in. I was confused, but he began muttering, saying I was too pale and too old, and he left. I called my dad, but he didn't answer, so I climbed through the window and went to the police. They put me on a plane home that same hour. I don't really tell people because it's a bit of a crazy story and sounds made up, and hence why I'm posting it here, but yeah. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I was a rocket scientist. I worked on the 114 AGM. The science was verifying rocket bodies. The backbone of science is to repeat experiments. My job was to make sure you were going to get the same result every time. People call me a liar all the time because their idea of a rocket scientist is Von Braun. I once won a $500 raffle during a routine visit to my local tea shop. It was the building's annual Black Friday event, and there were 5 baskets with varying amounts of goods, services, and coupons. I needed tea, so my only stop was the tea shop. It cost me $20 to fill my tins, but they said raffle tickets were given out after a $25 purchase. I said, screw it, and got a hot tea for me and the woman in line behind me. Entered with that one ticket. I got a call a few days later saying that I won the top prize basket. When I went to claim, they asked about my purchases. I told them, and they said the drawings had over 1,000 tickets and many people had over a dozen entries. The raffle prize included $25 to the tea shop. I once won an expensive blanket in a raffle at work. The raffle was for charity and they bugged me to enter it, so I bought one $1 ticket, while all the older ladies at work bought 5 or 10 because they really wanted that blanket. I was the only person at the department store who only bought 1 ticket. This was in the early 90s and I was only making $4.10 an hour, 20 to 25 hours a week, and that dollar came out of my gas money. The day of the drawing, I sat in the break room, and as I passed by the blanket, I thought, I better not forget to take that home tonight. I snorted in disbelief at the silly thought and went off to do work. A couple of hours later, I was informed that I'd won the blanket, and yes, I was freaked out, and yes, I remembered to take it home. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. I mean, it totally is. That's like the Cat Congressional Medal of Honor. Right? If a cat closes its eyes around you, it means it trusts you, but if it frickin' births kittens inches from your face, you must be like family. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's doorknobs. It turns out it's a fake. Doorknobs were invented after Napoleon died. I'm intrigued by the fact that this is the story that your family decided to pass on from one generation to the next far enough to lose track of the relation, and just refer to the subject as an ancestor. I survived a plane crash in the desert, trapped there for 2 days, and was rescued by 2 guys who were trying to bet if they could cook an egg in the sand. I spent a really cool day in London with Christian Slater and his mum. His mum is adorable. I received 8 knife wounds. I didn't get the chance to tell my story in court as they pled guilty before I was called. I was drunk and came out of the pub I was in to get some fresh air. I walked past 3 guys and one of them asked me for a cigarette. I told him I don't smoke and he immediately became aggressive. I argued with him for a while and his friends started shouting at me and threatening me. At this point, he kind of disappeared behind me. One of the others showed me a knife, so I turned and walked away. I knew they were following me as I walked back to the pub. I had a bus stop on my left-hand side and a building on my right. I looked up and saw the first guy walking towards me. It was fight or flight and I'd got nowhere to fly to, so I decided that attack was the best form of defense. I think I managed 1 punch before the 3 of them jumped me. They'd been robbing and beating people up all over town for about 2 weeks beforehand. I got a hernia by sneezing too hard. Well, I got mine trying to match my wife's pregnant belly. Pop. Some prolonged screaming ensued from me. At age 50 odd and with limited to no video game experience, my mother completed Mario 64 before I did, and about half the time it finally took me to do it. My brother is 31, I'm 19, and when he was born, his grandmother, we don't share the same father, bought him an NES. My mother, not knowing what to do with it, turned it on and played Super Mario Bros. She spent 2 months every day trying to beat the game, even buying a strategy guide to go through it. She beat the game and never touched a video game again. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time and never got caught until the Ancestry website happened. Sounds a bit like my great-grandfather. He had a wife in France and then 2 in the US and neighboring counties. He got caught, though. My great-grandmother was wife number 2. She found out about wife number 3 and divorced him. No one knew about the first wife in France until I pulled his service records from World War I. I can smell some illnesses and chronic symptoms. My sense of smell is normally pretty average, but I can sometimes smell if a person is sick before they start showing symptoms, and I've been able to identify or predict 2 seizures, a diabetic blood sugar drop, and multiple chronic migraines before they happened. Are you a service dog? No, but if I could actually work as a service dog, that would be frickin' awesome. A pelican engulfed my head with its massive frickin' beak when I was a small child. Pelicans are absolute C-words. I mean, I've long been of the opinion that almost all birds are absolute C-words. If I did a video on the AmITheA channel featuring almost all bird stories, I fear that my bias would lead me to labeling all of them the villains of the story. And I guess none of them can be the ones writing in the stories themselves, so it would be very skewed even before I leaned in with my avian racism. I bought a guitar amp from Brad Whitford of Aerosmith when I was 17. He and Steven Tyler served up cheeseburgers for me and my friends. To explain further, so Brad's son was a punk and I knew him from the scene. I was in a band that had the same local marginal success. This was in 97-98 in Boston. I needed a new amp for our first US tour, but had very little money. I was getting drunk with his son, and on a whim, I asked him if his dad had any amps laying around that he didn't need. We laughed and carried on partying. The next day, I got a call at my home. It was Mr. Whitford himself. He was super nice, but to the point. My son says you've got a band and you need a good rig for your Les Paul. I've got something in mind for you. Just gotta have my guy get it from the warehouse. Come by my house in Norwell this weekend and check it out. That was the gist of the call. Obviously, the whole band came with me. And our roadie. We get to his house and it's totally him. So weird. These guys were like gods in Boston. I wasn't the hugest fan, but I knew him from his work with Wayne's World. He takes me to one of his garages, where there's this cool full stack. The brand is Bedrock, an old company from New Hampshire that made good quality amps in the 80s. This one was custom made for Brad. Basically, Marshall components. 4 tubes, all the knobs go to 11. Not kidding. Still has the Property of Aerosmith stickers on it. He plugs it in and rips a crazy solo on his Les Paul, and then hands it to me and I play a couple of power chords. He asks for $300 for the whole thing. I pay him and he tells his son to give us a tour of the house. And this is where it gets nuts. It's just like you expect. Tons of gold records, platinum records, pictures of him with people like John Lennon, Robert De Niro, and Joey Ramone. Then we get to see his studio and the largest collection of Marshall amps in the world. Seriously, like 200 cabs. A wall of guitars. Guitars so pretty and amps so cool that it made sense for him to find the one he sold me dispensable. After the house tour, he told me to meet him at the little bar and grill that they own in town. When we get there early, and he arrives 30 minutes later with motherfrickin' Steven Tyler in tow, "Are you guys the punk group?" Tyler was so nice. They went in the back and came out with burgers for all of us on the house. Then they straight up just left, Irish goodbyed even. I still have the amp. I used it on the road for almost 10 years in 5 bands. Now it's just a conversation piece, but it still works. I'll crank her up every now and then. Lost my heel in a lawnmower accident. I was 4 at the time, and I won't say who exactly did it, but he was mowing, and it was a riding mower, and the hitch was on the back where you can hook a little trailer. I loved to stand on that part and ride. Well, this time I saw a frog in the grass, and being the 4-year-old I was at the time, I jumped off the mower and onto the grass, and put my hands over the frog to catch it, and he didn't realize I'd jumped off, and he backed up. I had my tongue surgically enhanced for more reach and flexibility when I was 8. I won 2 TV game shows, the $10,000 Pyramid, where I won $10,300 in 1975, and Sale of the Century. I was on the show for 9 days and won $34,000 in cash and prizes in 85. I once drove a locomotive backwards through the Canadian Rockies. I have won an actual WWE match. Despite having a genetic tremor, I've been playing guitar passionately for 8 years. Arrested and spent 3 days in a holding cell for a crime that I didn't commit, about a year after the whole matter was done and dusted with. Mind you, I say I didn't commit the crime, but I was involved in the story from start to finish. So my wife and then girlfriend and I had eloped. We crossed over 3 states in India over a 5-day period to get married. My father-in-law, and then mortal nemesis, was a well-connected man. He got in touch with his contacts in the police department to try and get a hold of us and filed a formal complaint as part of due process. Long story short, we got married. The rather inept police couldn't find a couple of 21-year-olds. Over the next 4 months, all of it was sorted out. First we were vilified, then the parents were mollified, and life went on. But in the beautiful ending to that story, my father-in-law forgot to retract his complaint. Fast forward to our first wedding anniversary, and we were taking a flight out of the country for a celebratory vacation, from Bombay Airport, India, to Dubai Airport, the United Arab Emirates. I was flagged at immigration and was taken across to a cell where I was duly arrested. My crime? Kidnapping. I was being accused of having kidnapped the lady I was now married to. Taken to a cell whilst my wife tried to explain the misunderstanding. The old C-word of a cop told her, "Mom, don't worry, we know how Stockholm Syndrome works. You're safe now," etc. And this was on a Friday evening. Due judicial process was followed and I was released by the judge on the following Monday. What really obvious thing have you only just realized? That the phrase mint condition means like new because it's the condition coins leave the mint in. I must have been around 11 or 12 years old when I realized that in order of appearance during the end credits of a movie doesn't list the actors or actresses by who is just the most good-looking. I learned a couple of years ago that it's not the mayor of bad news, it's actually the bearer of bad news. I'm 25. Cilantro and coriander are the same plant. I only just today realized that the walk the plank on a boat is not a special edition that pirates added to their ships as a means of public execution that looked like a little wooden diving board. It is in fact the very same plank as the gangplank that you'd normally use to get on and off the ship. It is not the presence of the plank that is threatening, but the absence of the dock. Until recently, I also thought that, despite the obvious name, being keel-hauled meant that you were just thrown off the ship and left behind. I didn't realize that they tied you to a line, threw you off, and dragged you under the ship's keel. That you have to add a can of water to Campbell's soup. Apparently, I've been drinking straight condensed soup this whole time. The first time I visited the USA, I was on my own and in New York and going to all of the museums. I kept seeing signs that said no strollers and thought, because we call strollers prams in the UK, that you guys were just super strict about the proper amount of attention required to visit a museum. I actually pretended to show more interest than I had in order to not be thought of as some deadbeat out for a casual stroll. It wasn't until about day 3 that I saw a no strollers sign that included a graphic for idiots like me. That calling someone simple is just a nice way of calling someone stupid. My wife informed me of this after 28 years of my grandma calling me simple. I realized at the age of 26 that narwhals are real because they were on an Octonauts episode. I walked into the room and was like, I thought they only do real animals on this show, and then the kid's dad said, "You're joking, right?" Honestly, we can give this author some leeway for not realizing that the unicorn dolphin was in fact a real creature. Now we just have to trick him into thinking that the horsey version is actually a living, breathing fauna as well. That when I was a kid and my dad would take me to the video store on Friday nights and he would go into the back room where only adults were allowed, that he was looking at naughty adult films. I kept seeing the same Chinese characters on restaurants' signs and I always wanted to know what it meant. A week ago I found out. They mean restaurant. I used to always pour water into our coffee maker 1 glass at a time. It was such a pain in the butt, especially to fill the reservoir to the number of cups I wanted. Until I realized I could just fill the carafe with water, which has the exact same measurements, and pour the water in that way. I recently realized I was allergic to carrots. I just thought they made everyone's mouth numb, you know? Like almonds. I also learned recently that I have an almond allergy. Same here. I thought that raw hazelnuts don't taste good because they give this weird tingle in your mouth. Then I found out I had a nut allergy when it suddenly turned from tingle to anaphylaxis, and I ended up in a hospital for eating nut chocolate. Oh, same! I asked my husband why carrots made your mouth itchy. I'm a 35-year-old woman. I always thought you can't have your cake and eat it too was a weird saying, because why wouldn't I be able to eat my fricking slice of cake? It's my cake! Nobody was telling me that I can't have my cake. It turns out they mean you can't eat the cake while also still retaining it. Once it's eaten, it's gone. An idiom I didn't understand until this year. I'm 27. The Italian version of this is that you can't have a full bottle and a drunk wife, or something along those lines. This sounds ridiculous, but I recently found out about the term knee-jerk reaction. My whole life I'd been saying it how I heard it and just figured it was spelled something like knee-drick reaction, like it was some psychology term. English was not my first language, so I was mind-blown when I realized how keys, kiss, he's, his, this, these, among other things, differed in sound and pronunciation. I first noticed this when I told my boyfriend I wanted a keys, and he looked very confused. Now I try my best to pronounce them properly. My whole life I thought pay-per-view was actually pay-per-view, because I'd only ever heard people say it and only recently saw it written out. My boyfriend didn't know that his electric toothbrush has a timer on it that goes off at 1 minute and 2 minutes. He actually returned it and got a new one thinking it was broken, since the timer is just a brief sort of pause and reduction in the vibration. He'd be like, "What the frick? I literally just charged this fricking thing," thinking that the battery was already dying. One day, I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, I brought up how I liked that my toothbrush let me know when I'd brushed long enough, and it was like a light bulb went off in his head. And suddenly he put it together that was what his toothbrush was doing the whole time. That the big ship's wheel I got to turn as a kid was not actually controlling the cruise ship. This jogged my memory of something. When I was around 13, I was on a flight with a bunch of other kids. I fell asleep during the flight but woke up during some turbulence. A couple of kids near me saw me waking up startled and made a big show of saying, "Wow, I can't believe the pilot did a barrel roll." A few other people I talked to about confirmed it, and it took me embarrassingly far into adulthood to realize some people were just messing with me. I mean, a pilot on a commercial flight wouldn't do that, right? I was 28 before I realized the meaning to the "why is 6 afraid of 7" joke. I always just thought it was dumb. 7, 8, 9, like you're just counting. The electric bill wasn't paid until later in my life. I realized that to be in one's birthday suit, it means to be without clothes. I thought for the longest time it was a specific set of clothes you would wear on your birthday each year. I found out when I asked, what happens when you don't fit in your birthday suit anymore? For the longest time, I always thought that prima donna was pre-Madonna. Principal Belding from Saved by the Bell is named Bell Ding. The reason the cord on the vacuum spins is so that you can take the whole cord off at once instead of unraveling it one loop at a time, like I have been my whole life. That parents have children write letters to Santa so they can figure out what to buy them for Christmas. I can't believe how I never put that together after 32 years on this earth. I thought it was just a fun little tradition. My bedroom door was broke and I finally got around to fixing it. I thought the knob was broke because it was pushed in towards the door. So I pulled it out and realized that was how you locked the door. As a small child, maybe like age 4, my family told me the powder room door at my grandparents' house didn't lock. I had a reputation for accidentally locking myself into places, so they didn't want me locking myself in there, I guess. I was 18 before I accidentally locked the door just like that. Realized how it worked, and emerged from the bathroom mortified and amused that I'd gone all these years thinking that the door just didn't lock. No one even remembered lying to me about the lack of lock. It's called men's wear, as in W-E-A-R house, and not men's warehouse, as in a regular warehouse. It's been a couple of years since I realized this, and I think it's just a clever name now. What the frick? I just looked it up and I still don't believe you. Consider the narrator educated about this as well. That's a play on words that's completely escaped me for several decades since I learned about the store. The villain in Halloween is not played by Mike Myers. It would have been a lot funnier if he was. This little piggy didn't go to the market to do any shopping. Wait. Then why are the other pigs eating roast beef? I feel like there's at least one of these pigs with its own agenda. For a long time, I thought that to bust a nut meant that you were going to kick a guy in the nuts or beat him up. So anytime I was getting worked up or angry talking about some guy, I would say, I'm going to bust his fricking nut, not really knowing what I was meaning. Nobody ever said anything, but it was always followed by my friends laughing, so I assumed it was because I was being dramatic. Years go by, and my coworker is telling me about some rude person he met, and I said, you should definitely bust that guy's nut, to which he paused and said, do you even know what that means? Suffice it to say, I was extremely embarrassed and horrified when he explained it to me. Similarly, I had a friend who didn't know that friends with benefits meant, well, you know. She thought it meant like a friend from work who was literally beneficial to your work. I had a boss that was under the impression that bust a nut meant to work extremely hard. Suffice to say, our team meeting ended awkwardly when Sean would tell us to all go and bust a nut after the meeting. Super embarrassing, but in college I would order Roman Cokes because I thought everyone else was ordering the same thing. It turns out I misheard everyone and found out it was just rum and Coke. When teenagers said we're going to TP a house, I always thought it was teepee, and it never made sense to me since they just covered a house with toilet paper. I recently realized that they didn't mean put up a Native American tent, and that TP was the initials for toilet paper. I'm 27. This girl I know has a dog named Diogi. 2 years into knowing her and being around Diogi, I was having a conversation with her sister-in-law and said, "I love the name Diogi. How did she come up with that?" Her sister-in-law responds, "D-O-G." And I said, "Yeah, it's a neat name." She started laughing and said, "No, D-O-G, the way you spell dog." I'm still mind-blown about this. We got a chocolate Labrador quite a few years ago. My dad has been known to name animals after what species they are. This time around, my mom wouldn't let him name the dog Dog, so he named her Kitty. He also named his horse No Name. This is why we don't let him name animals anymore. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Pufferfish suck in water, not air. Okay, yeah, I saw one get pulled from the ocean and deflated and it spat out water. I was shocked to my very core. Everyone else was like, yeah, of course. That they put measurement stickers next to gas station doors, so if a robber is running out of the store, you can get a better estimate of their height. I always thought they were just there for something fun to do on road trip stops. More than that, they're not actually accurate if you stand against them and measure that way. They're supposed to be placed so the camera will show the correct height of the person, compensating for the angle of the camera. I'm currently in my mid-30s. I didn't realize until I was about 28 years old that my mum's name was Betty and her sister's name was Wilma. Betty and Wilma, from the Flintstones. And yes, they were definitely named after the cartoon, I asked. Flash forward 2 years later, and my Aunt Wilma informed me that they were fraternal twins. Again, another thing for 30 years I hadn't known. A few folks have asked for a bit of context on the twin thing. My mum died when I was fairly young, so I never had her birthday as a thing. And I wasn't super close to Wilma, so I wasn't really celebrating hers either. I guess it was just known in my family, so nobody ever mentioned it until totally randomly she said something about it. On the name thing, they actually both went by their nicknames their whole lives, so I never even thought of them as Betty and Wilma, but just Mum and Aunt Cookie. She likes to bake. When I was little, we had an Australian shepherd named Sydney. I didn't understand why her name was Sydney until 18 years later. I saw a place labeled as Public House when I moved nearby recently. It was at that moment I realized, oh, that's why they call them pubs. It's short for public house. In Russian phrase, public house means a whorehouse, not a pub. I wonder. When people say that tornadoes sound like trains, they don't mean that tornadoes whistle a choo-choo sound. My sister asked me about 2.5 months ago when we were watching John Wick 3 during the desert scene, if they were real, and I asked what were real, and she said sandlands. And I busted out laughing so gosh darn hard and said, "You mean deserts? Yeah, they're real." Thinking about it right now got me laughing. Up until last year, I thought Nat Geo was a person. I then realized it was short for National Geographic. Nathaniel Giotopoulos actually was a founder of the channel, but it's only a coincidence. I thought astigmatism was a stigmatism, so I thought you could have two stigmatisms. Honestly, in my 30s, I've been wondering about this for the better part of a decade now and never bothered to look it up. I'm learning so many facts for dummies in this video. Today, my friend realized pipe cleaners were originally for cleaning pipes, after I suggested using one to clean a metal straw because it's similar to a pipe. Oh! I had that one about 7 years ago when my high butt was trying to clean out a glass pipe. Man, this is so stupid. Someone should invent some sort of frickin' pipe cleaner. Oh. That people who always seem to know what direction it is, north, south, east, and west, aren't somehow magical magnets but are rather just noticing where the gosh darn sun is in the sky. Why did no one tell me? The sun is a huge indicator, but I know plenty of people who keep track of direction without the sun without even thinking about it. I'm not one of them. I regret to inform you all that it just occurred to me the other day that The Sims is called The Sims because they're in a simulation. I'm 26. That getting your tires rotated means moving the tires to a different location on the car and not just spinning the wheel. I learned that allspice is actually one spice and not a blend of spices containing cinnamon and nutmeg. I also just learned that from your comment. Personal injury lawyer commercials play more frequently during daytime TV because their clientele is injured, stuck at home watching daytime TV. The houses in Bikini Bottom are car mufflers. What the frick? And Patrick is dumb and knows nothing because he lives under a rock. Bikini Bottom is named after the nuclear bomb testing site at Bikini Atoll, and sea life is weird from the radiation. Also, bikinis are named after the radioactive site as well. In Pokemon, there is a same-type attack bonus where if you use a move that is the same type as the Pokemon itself, then the move does 1.5 times the damage. People also refer to it as stab damage, which I thought was just a colloquial term for 1.5 times damage. I only just realized that stab stands for same-type attack bonus. My mum used to make my sisters and I belly buttons for dinner. I was 27 when I realized that they were actually tortellini, but she knew we were dumb kids and would refuse something named so strange even though they were delicious. To clarify how dumb we were, once she was making fried shrimp for dinner. My sisters and I hated fried shrimp, but we loved popcorn shrimp from Long John Silver's. We complained, so my mum said, "Okay, go away and I'll make you some popcorn shrimp instead." We left and she says she took half the shrimps she was already using and cut it in two and then fried it that way. We cleaned the fricking bowl. We were stupid kids and she was a good, smart mum. Cruella de Vil was a cruel devil. The word for explorer in Spanish is exploradora. Dora the Explorer is a Spanish play on words. When I was a kid, my mum told me my rabbit Rosie went to live on a farm. In my early 20s, I saw an episode of The Sopranos where everyone makes fun of Tony when he realizes his dog didn't really go to live on a farm. That's when I realized Rosie had not gone to a farm either, and I would like to officially apologize for the cascading wave of terrible realizations my post has caused. Truly, we sit on a throne of lies. Oh man, I dated a girl once who started telling me about her old dog who went to live on a farm. I didn't even say anything, but just the look on my face made her stop and think about it for the first time and go, oh no. And we had a good laugh about that, but it was pretty wild to see the realization in real time. Today, the radio taught me Mariah Carey wrote and sang All I Want for Christmas Is You. All this time, I thought it was just a cover that she did so well that people loved it more than the original. Turns out, it is the original. Undergarments and socks are there to cover places that sweat and stink so that you don't sweat and stink on the thing on top of the undergarment, and can replace the undergarment more often. Except for men's undershirts, which exist so that nobody has to see my moobs when I wear a white dress shirt. Cat toes. I knew they existed, I've seen them and everything. It's an extremely obvious thing. A few weeks ago, I touched a cat's paw and started laughing like it was the craziest thing ever. Then proceeded to make my discovery known. You're all welcome. Also, bunnies and a bunch of other animals have their own kind of toe things too. Phineas and Ferb are shaped like a P and an F. The song It's Getting Hot in Here isn't actually talking about here's temperature. I felt very, very stupid. Dove soap and Dove chocolate are from different companies. Cigarettes are called cigarettes because they're mini cigars. Alucard from Castlevania is Dracula backwards. I honestly thought that this script was just going to be a home run of me laughing at other dummies who missed self-explanatory expressions and obvious references, but this is the 9th or 10th time one of them has blown my mind, so what does that say about me? Actually, don't answer that question. In the movie Cats vs. Dogs, when the dog goes, "Son of my mom," he's actually saying son of a B word. Remember that the secret agent blue-gray kitten with the Russian accent? That breed of cat is called a Russian blue. That the Houston Astros comes from astronauts, and the Baltimore Ravens are because Edgar Allan Poe lived and is buried in Baltimore. I'm 30 and realized a few months ago that howdy is cowboy for how do you do. Tenure is a whole word and not 10-year, which is what I thought teachers got as like job security once they'd worked for 10 years. Say My Name by Destiny's Child is about a girl on the phone to her man and she wants proof that he's not with another girl. I realized when I was 16 that reindeer were real. I 100% thought they were fake like elves and Santa Claus. This is so stupid, but I didn't realize my mums were gay until I was almost 14 and I literally heard my mum say, "I'm gay" to my grandma as a joke. I knew that lesbians and same-sex and gays were relatively interchangeable, but it didn't click as "my mums are lesbians," which is another term for being gay, and they are gay, until that moment. I also have a gay mom, but I didn't know the word lesbian till 6th grade. I got into a massive fight with my best friend because she called my mom a lesbian, and I didn't know what that was, so I thought it was an insult. Nope, turns out if your mom has a girlfriend, she's probably a lesbian. I'm 25 next week and I still think about it. The Grammys are called that because the awards are gramophones. That Ecuador is named after the equator. Yep, literally just equator, but in Spanish. My friend, 22 years old, only realized last year that dolphins have to swim and live in the water to survive. He thought they're land mammals, but they just really like to swim for fun. That Michelangelo's David is David from David and Goliath. How did I not know this? I thought it was just a dude called Dave. I love how many comments I'm getting from people learning this today or very recently, and who just thought he was some dude called Dave as well. We got there in the end, guys, better late than never. Bonus, I also never knew there was a sling. I thought that was his trousers, and yes, I honestly thought that. I never saw the rocks. That American Express and Amex are the same thing, and I've been helpfully telling customers in Australia, "Yep, we take both," for years. Okay, this was a couple of years ago, but it was something I realized way too late in life. You're supposed to use the towel to dry yourself after a shower. I was just wrapping it around myself and walking around until I air dried. I live in a part of Chicago called Greektown for 8 years, and I never realized the blue and white Christmas lights were meant to represent the colors of their flag. It just dawned on me today. What are the craziest small-town stories from where you grew up? One of my friend's uncles, let's call him Rob, acquired a pet raccoon. He named it Cuddles, and one day Cuddles went missing. So he goes out to the road to check to see if she's been hit by a car, and sure enough, there was a raccoon there, obviously dead. He picks up the raccoon and brings her back to his house and then starts to dig a grave for it. During this time, Rob is calling all his friends and family, inviting them out for a funeral for his dead raccoon. We all show up with food and beer. Rob is crying and finishing up burying the dead raccoon when all of a sudden, Cuddles shows up and starts tugging on his pant leg while he was shoveling. Now, we were all there already with food and beer, so instead of a funeral, we had a celebration for the return of Cuddles. Party included beer, a band, and a pig roast. Rob and Cuddles are often seen together at the various mud bogs my town has. If you don't know what a mud bog is, it's when you drive your usually big pickup truck through a pile of mud and see how far it can be driven through before it gets stuck. Also involves a lot of drinking. More small-town stories. My grandfather, who I lived with when I was a young child, used to play pranks on us. One of his favorites was to go down to the road and pick up possums and then place them in boxes. He'd tell us he'd gotten us a surprise and to slowly open the box. Scared the crap out of me seeing a possum play dead staring up at me. Finally, the umpteenth time of him doing this, I'd learned not to open boxes from Granddad anymore. High school classmate brought to school a decaying human skull he found on his farm. He wasn't sure what it was. It came from a man who'd been murdered in the winter and then stuffed into a drainage tube on this guy's farm. When spring came, thawing snow and rain washed the remains out into the clearing where my friend found the skull. My hometown once had its major roads shut down because a rafter of wild turkeys decided to hang out in the street for a day. Why do I get the feeling like you telling this story is just because you got to say the phrase rafter of turkeys? I got a parking ticket for $5 for blocking a sidewalk. When I didn't pay it in time, they added on a $2 late fee. In Jefferson City, Missouri, the tickets are $3. Lobbyists visiting from bigger cities are said to skip on paying the meter and frame the tickets in their offices. The narrator should note that these stories and the prices are from the early 2010s and have almost certainly gone up at least a little in the intervening time. Stop loading up your cars for Jefferson City, it might be at least $7 now. A few years ago, a friend of mine unsuccessfully, thank goodness, tried to self-delete by taking a bunch of pain pills. He was taken to a small hospital in Millen, Georgia. I was living in Atlanta at the time, so some friends and I drove in to check on him. When we made it down to the hospital, we were asked to wait outside his room while a nurse was in the room attending to our friend. While we were standing in the hall, a man dressed in coveralls walked up to us. He was obviously a mechanic by the way of oil stains on his coveralls and the strong smell of grease. We struck up a conversation with him and he told us he had been down the street at the local mechanic shop, suspicions confirmed, and he walked down to check on, what I now assumed to be, our mutual friend. He moved to walk into the room and we told him everyone was supposed to wait outside until the nurse was done in the room. "Oh, it's okay," he says, pulling a stethoscope out of the pocket of his coveralls. "I'm the doctor." I was an EMT for a small company. One of our trucks hit a deer in a neighboring jurisdiction. An argument ensued over who got to keep the deer. Another one, a man high on crystal threw the cash register at the store clerk. After a pursuit that ended when he was captured on the roof of a bowling alley, he ended up in the hospital for having a broken ankle, running. A tiny emergency room means he's placed in one of 2 neighboring beds. The other one was occupied by the store clerk. Hilarity ensued. I lived next to a farm in Siler City, North Carolina. One day as a kid, I walked down the road to explore under the bridge on my road. To my surprise, I found a bag full of rotten cow carcasses. How many cow carcasses can fit in a single bag? Depends on how rotten they are, I'm sure. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona in the 80s. As a kid, one of my favorite places to go with my father was Ruff's Shooting and Liquor Store. And it was exactly what it sounds like, a combination weapon and liquor store. Another Flagstaff story, there was a small airport outside the town, very small. In the morning, the elk would come through the tree line and lay on the asphalt runway because it was warm. So every morning a bunch of guys would go out onto the runway and basically run around screaming and clapping and flailing their arms to chase the elk away so that the airplanes could do what they do, mostly taking off, landing, and occasionally sliding into a field. Eventually, the elk got used to that, so then they figured that one guy could go out, fire a shotgun into the trees, and the elk would take off. Then they got used to that too. So it ended up, every morning these guys would go out onto the runway and basically kick, hit, and harass these elk until they finally got sick of it and wandered off. This went on for years until some genius, obviously not a local boy, came along and determined that putting up a fricking fence might go a long way in alleviating the Flagstaff-Pulliam Airport's elk problem. With regards to your first, I thought that weapon and liquor stores were a common thing. Maybe I live in redneck land as well. There's another store not too far away, in northern Maine of all places, that sells weapons, liquor, and wedding gowns. I crap you not. I don't know if it's still there, but it was the butt end nowhere in Wisconsin near Lake 10. Yeah, that's its name. There was a Casey's that functioned as an ice cream parlor, a pizza place, liquor store, weapons and ammo shop, baits and other fishing supplies, grocery store, fireworks stand, and gas station, all at once. It was truly a general store. I remember their homemade ice cream was really good too, but I might be seeing that through my nostalgia lenses. For the curious, I think it was Price County. It's been a decade since I've been there, but the Lake 10 in Wisconsin's Department of Natural Resources matches pretty well with the fishing I remember being there. My parents were from small towns, but then were stationed up in a very small town in Maine, say about 800 people, where we lived for a while we were kids. My mum decided one day to move some furniture around. She finished and walked down to the post office to pick up the mail. She was stopped twice by other ladies who asked why she moved her furniture. Yep, moving your furniture was such news that her neighbor felt obliged to call around and tell people about it, and they all felt obliged to comment on it. Yeah, those kind of creepy encounters were a daily part of my life when I lived in the middle of nowhere, Kansas as a kid. My brothers and I were well known without knowing anyone else in the town because it's not every day 2 wards of the state are sent in to live with their lesbian aunt. Every day someone was calling us by our names and asking about stuff that I felt they shouldn't have known. It was so weird to me as I lived in a big city before being shoved off to a town of 300 people. Funny thing is, I went to a school about 10 miles away in a slightly larger town of 1,500. When I moved back to the city, my graduating class had over 400 and the whole school about 1,400. Something what the frick, I delivered papers with my brother and 2 cousins in our small town, and it was well known that Charlie's radiator shop was actually a crystal front. I had the pleasure of walking about a mile into the country every day to Charlie's house to deliver his paper. I never had any trouble, but as a 12 or 13-year-old girl, it was pretty terrifying. Grew up in a little town in Alaska. April 1st, 1974, a guy hired a helicopter to bring hundreds of old tires to the dormant volcano that can be seen from town. He set them on fire, scaring the crap out of everybody. That is simultaneously an amazing prank and a signal that there was absolutely nothing going on if that's how bored the town's presumably richest man was filling his time. Probably spent someone's monthly salary to do that. So my family is visiting my uncle in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, at the family farm where my dad grew up. As luck would have it, I have to have my appendix removed. This sucks because I was a boy of 11, and the big fun of visiting my uncle on his farm is the go-karts and motorbikes, and now all I can do is shoot the .22 because of the stitches. So we need to go to the hardware store in the small town of 500 people to buy .22 rounds. I walk in with my dad and immediately go to the counter. The guy looks at me and says, "How are you feeling?" I say, "Huh?" He says, "You had your appendix removed." "Okay," I say. Now, I've never met this man before, nor been in his store, and we've only been in the store for 5 minutes. The man laughed. "Oh, you're wondering how I knew. So I read this in the newspaper that John, incidentally the name of my grandfather as well, was admitted to the hospital for an appendix being removed, and I thought it was your grandfather. Then I remember hearing that your father was visiting and his name was John. Then you and your dad came in and I recognized him from when he used to come in, and I figured you were the one with the appendix removed." As we left, I asked my dad, "When was the last time you were in the store?" "Dad, 30 years ago when I was 8. I think the weirdest part of the story is that having your appendix removed was newsworthy. Oh, seriously, our town's local journal printed a story that my dad and his girlfriend once visited me when I was living in the big city for college. I still live in the city. There's no way I'm moving back to that. I don't want to make the front page. I once lived in a small town in the Appalachians, and I have a story somewhat similar to yours. The town was too small to support any kind of hospital, but they had a diner that functioned as both the local watering hole and the doctor's office. The doctor owned the place and also served as the main cook. You could sit at the bar next to someone and not know if they were getting something to eat or if they were getting inoculated. The town was very, very small and remote. The schoolhouse I went to was the smallest public school in that state by a long shot. The senior class, the school went K-12 and only had about 40 kids, and not all of them lived in town, did a family tree project and discovered that they were all related. Not even distantly, it was like third cousin or something. The punchline, they still had prom. Also, our neighbor, who lived somewhat close as the crow flies, but about 45 minutes driving through the mountains, gave my mum her old wood-fired range because she had been hooked up with electricity and didn't need it anymore. Keep in mind that this was in the mid-90s. I have too many stories about that place and the crazy folks who live there. I didn't think any towns like that still existed, but they're out there. They're kind of like time capsules. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I remember we had this old guy we called the Gum Man. He would hang out in the local Piggly Wiggly, a grocery store, all day and ask little kids if they'd gone to church that week. If you told him you had, he'd give you a piece of gum. It was only later in life that I found out he wouldn't give any gum to black kids, only white. After typing this all out, I realized how creepy the whole thing actually was. Piggly Wiggly, that's the very definition of the South. I'm sure when you enter their store, there's some kind of temporal displacement thingy-majig, and you get transported right back to the 1950s, which might explain what you saw, right? My rural Washington state town was one of those little pockets of bigotry that people forget exist in the Northwest. We had precisely one Jewish family for a while, but they moved away soon after an elementary school teacher told one of their little girls that she and her family had killed Jesus. We also had exactly one black police officer, out of around 4 total, who was constantly treated terribly and assigned crap work until they finally fired him for no good reason. There's still a lawsuit pending about that, I believe, and in both those instances, someone wrote an anonymous letter to the local paper saying that the buttholes involved represented the silent majority of the town. We also had the typical hillbilly crystal problem. That made headlines when our sole 3-unit apartment complex blew up in the middle of our minuscule downtown area. Then there was the time that the local pagan family decided to do a midnight ritual on a railroad bridge and they all got hit by a train. You can imagine what the silent majority thought about that business. On top of all of that, our high school mascot was a potato. We had a dog run for mayor, and Lewis and Clark mentioned us in their journals as the place where they got a particularly crappy night's sleep. I can't be the only one that's cracking up at the image of a high school pep rally full of young kids cheering on the hometown potatoes. Not only were they cheering the potatoes, they were occasionally encouraged in their efforts by a student in a potato costume that basically looked like a very angry and aggressive Mr. Potato Head wearing a crown. He would mimic and occasionally playfully make overtly creepy moves on the cheerleaders, and sometimes would lead us in a dance called the Mighty Spudder. Also, our elementary school children were known as the Tater Tots. Small town in central or southern Illinois, a man's horse died and he hadn't taken it to the dump. Some drunk rednecks got together about a week after it died and decided they should take it instead. They tied it behind their truck and started dragging it to the dump, but decided it would be more fun to drag it around the square a few times. This was fine until the skin tore and it started leaking horse fluid and parts all over the pavement. And here was me thinking that people would bury a creature like that rather than taking it to the local rubbish tip. The more you know. Also, I guess these guys literally painted the town red. Or the town square, anyway. Rural Colorado. Our dog died while we were away, and the vet didn't have a fridge big enough for it. We really wanted to bury him at home, so he went into the fridge of the local restaurant for a few days. Dad says it was really hard to dig the hole because the dog was near frozen with his legs all sticking straight outwards, and he had to make it bigger than usual. Bigger than usual? Do you bury a lot of dogs? My hometown has an endless supply of these stories. Every spring, my hometown has a livestock festival, a week-long celebration of livestock. One lucky high school girl is crowned the Livestock Queen and presides over the festivities, a prestigious position to be sure. During the Livestock Week, tickets are sold to an event called Cow Patty Bingo, in which an indoor showroom is divided into over 100 small squares and a cow is released onto the floor. If you're lucky enough to have the cow crap into the square you'd chosen, you, my friend, are a winner. My high school tried that. The cheerleaders chased it all over the place and it was so frightened by the 30-odd random screaming girls that it attacked one, and then promptly busted down the gates and fled. That was the last time my high school tried that. I was offered $50 to cast a curse on NASCAR. But did you? I was trying to persuade them to be more skeptical of magic, although Dale Earnhardt is dead anyways, so it might be a lost cause. My next-door neighbors divorced. The mother won the house. When we moved away, the father bought our house. They're now both in homosexual relationships, living as next-door neighbors. I was 16, hanging out on the roof of a local establishment, because what the frick else are you going to do in small-town America, and a cop in uniform, who was drinking, offered me a beer. 25 now and I still occasionally get ID'd, so it's not like I even looked older than I am. I went to a field party in West Virginia after bailing my buddy out of jail for a DUI. When we got to the party, his arresting officer was there and they drank a beer together. Later the cops brought out boxing gloves so they could box some people at the party. A DUI in West Virginia was a $500 fine. I grew up in Memphis, but I used to go to this really small town in Arkansas a couple of weekends a month. I got a bowl cut with an actual bowl on my head by a barber with 3 fingers on one hand. I live in a small town. We have a saying, you don't lose your girlfriend, you lose your turn. Cue banjo. My neighbor was known to bring in junkies, and one of them was a smack addict. Well, this guy disappeared, and after about 3 weeks, a smell started coming from one of my neighbor's numerous camp trailers in his yard. They checked it out and the guy was dead in there. The autopsy reported that he'd had heart failure due to injecting pine sap because he ran out of smack. I have a lot more stories. I grew up in a town of less than 500 peeps. I was hanging out with my grandma's neighbor's 2 kids. Wes, the boy, wanted to go back in the bush. We lived in a rural area, and so his grandmother let him take me and my sister down the back road on an ATV. We were back there barely 10 minutes before we came across the most horrible stench I've ever smelled. Wes drove towards the smell and we found a cow graveyard. There were 25 or more dead cows in various states of decay. Wes's sister said she was going to throw up, so we left. Not really that what the frick, but I was quite young and had nightmares about zombie cows for months. Little children, including my sister, set out on the school's Environment Day to pick up trash in the woods. We found a World War II bomb. Maybe not a true what the frick story, but my favorite, my hometown is so small or so country story is that at our county fair there was a girl in my high school class that was a finalist in both the beauty pageant and the arm wrestling tournament. I was buying beer in a very small town in central Oregon. It was just a store or gas station on a state highway. As a young-looking 21-year-old, I carried my passport with me because I figured it was better and more believable ID. I got carded and handed him over my passport, and he said, "I asked for ID, not a book." My brother's university is in a town that's pretty much literally in a cornfield. The instructions on the school's website literally say, turn left at the stop sign, because there's only one in the entire town. University of Minnesota, Morris. Colder than Hoth and nothing but corn and alcoholism for miles. My local Walmart has a hitching post. That is all. Your town is the closest any of us will come to playing Red Dead Redemption in real life, and the rest of us are poorer for not having a hitching post outside our local megamarts. We had this local crazy lady, everyone called her Crazy Tina. She was messed up. Apparently at one time she was a normal person and had a family and everything, and then she started doing a bunch of substances and kind of lost it. But man, some of the stuff she did, crazy. She had a garden in her front yard, which sounds normal, but she was growing rubber boots. Yeah, she had planted like 20 or so rubber boots with just the tops peeking out. And she had another 30 or so just in a huge pile. It's been there as long as I can remember. She decided one day that she was going to paint her house, which again, sounds kind of normal. Except instead of doing it like a normal person, she bought a can of spray paint, and instead of spray painting like a normal person to get even coverage, she just freaking sprayed it all over. That led to more people going up to her house and spray painting members and crap on it. Then I guess she got tired of it, so she ripped off like half her siding. Not all of it, just half. And she was the only person in the entire town to have bars on her windows. I don't really live in a town where people put bars on their windows. She's literally the only person here who's done that. And if you ever walk down the street she lives on, holy crap, she'd be yelling, "Get the frick away from my house!" And then you'd have to run away from her and everything. She was nuts. She was like the crazy cat lady from The Simpsons, but had no living cats. And yeah, apparently she was once completely normal and a nice person. My mum went to school with her, and then something just went off in her brain and she was never the same way. You can always tell when the seasons change in my town by a man named Leon who walks everywhere. He's an older Native American man with long dark hair. When it starts to warm up every year without fail, he starts to wear his cut-off jean shorts. His legs are always shaved and he oils them down. He completes his look with a button-up Hawaiian shirt, a safari hat, and keds. An oldish lady, I'd say around her 50s, who was clearly 2 sandwiches short of a picnic, used to walk around town every day with her dog and just muttering things to herself. Her dog died while she was walking it, but she didn't notice and spent most of the day dragging a dog around the village until someone felt the need to mention it. Pretty sad. Also, I never saw her again much after that. I briefly dated a girl in high school that started doing the deed with her ex-stepdad and later married him. This guy is 25 years older than her and has a daughter with her mother. So in the end, she became her sister's stepmother. Thank God I got out of that relationship and that crap hole town. When has someone who clearly knew nothing tried to explain your own job to you? Emergency medical technician here. Went to a chest pain call-out for an older guy. The wife kept insisting that he just needed a few more sprays of her GTN, a potent and potentially dangerous oral spray used to treat angina, and that he'd be fine after that. She'd already administered goodness knows how much before we got there, which had tanked his blood pressure to dangerously low levels. Also, after checking him over, it became pretty clear that the pain was a result of a chest infection and not a cardiac event. So, as we transport him and try to prevent him from dying from the overdose of medicine she gave him, she's still harping on that we need to give him more because she knows it will work. When we turn our backs, she whips out a bottle of it and tries to give him another couple of doses. After we confiscated it and sat her back down, she demanded we let her use our truck cell phone to call our manager and complain that we were idiots and didn't know our job. When we got to the hospital, she tried to convince the staff there to dose her husband with unnecessary and potentially lethal medication. When we left, I noticed security attempting to disarm her of her bottle of GTN. We gave it back when we got to the ER. Presumably, she tried to dose him again. I'm a travel consultant. I've been working in the hotel world for 15 years, working in hotels as front desk, sales, group block coordinator, reservations, sales agent, and now I'm a travel consultant. There was an Ask Reddit thread, I forget what it was for, but someone was harping on about how the hotel couldn't refund them. How dare they tell me to contact Expedia? Many of the people responding to that person were like, "You go, girl, you report that place," or something along those lines. I wrote a response to it and said, actually, the hotel really can't refund you if you went through Expedia. You didn't pay the hotel, you paid Expedia. but Expedia bought the room for the hotel and therefore I did pay the hotel. No, the room was Expedia's to sell and you bought it, and the hotel can't refund you. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't because Expedia has your payment, not the hotel. The third party doesn't provide anything to the hotel other than the dates of stay, your room type, and that's it. They don't even tell us your phone number most of the time. Sometimes they give us a throwaway email. Well, that's bullcrap. Rabble. Well, no, that's not bullcrap. Imagine I bought 10 candy bars from the grocery store and then sold those candy bars at whatever price I decided was profitable. The people who brought those candy bars could not go to the grocery store and complain that something was wrong with it and demand a refund from them because they didn't buy those candy bars from the grocery store. They brought them from me. That store may even have a nice refund policy, but I may have a non-refundable policy. And because you brought it from me, you're subject to whatever policy I have in place. Much like buying a room off Expedia. I got this biblical flood of responses from people who claimed to be like, I work front desk, I don't know what you're talking about. And other people who claim to be avid travelers going, that's bullcrap, the hotel should do something, rabble. Come on, it's literally one of the most basic pieces of training you get in a hotel environment, that if you pay a third party for your reservation, any changes or refunds have to go through that company. I reckon none of these people who responded to me actually work in travel at all. I'm a physician. My mum knows more about medicine than me. I don't even try. Doctor here, my mum also knows more about medicine than me. Let's face the facts, no matter our training, our respective mums will always know more than us. It's just how it works. Social worker here, I had a banker try to tell me that human trafficking didn't exist, because she had never personally met anyone who'd been a victim.
Well, actually, Canon don't make professional cameras.
Okay, buddy. Me, a working photographer. Working in VFX, you will now and again expose someone to a naturally photographed shot you haven't worked on yet, only to hear it looks fake. Similarly, a shot in which many things are indeed fake, some yuts will inevitably pick out a real object and say it needs to be redone to fit in better.
It just doesn't look like a natural part of the scene.
Say what?
It looks too synthetic.
It's a physical prop shot in camera.
Well, what did you do to it?
I let light fall on it in front of a light sensor. Also in VFX and animation, and the amount of people who think the computer literally does everything for you is maddening. One lady couldn't fathom why they would pay me to do my job when
the computer just does it all for you anyway. It can't be that hard.
Trust me, I wouldn't be working this much overtime if I clicked the rig or sim button and had my entire asset or shot instantly done for me. I'm an explosive ordnance disposal technician. For some reason, there's a ton of combat engineers who think that they can do my job better than I can. This was told to me by a coworker. While he was standing around, he saw a Humvee screeching towards him and his team. The terrain was very bumpy and the vehicle was bouncing around. A combat engineer pulls up, gets out, and says he has to show them something they need to help him with. In the bed, there's an armed anti-tank mine that wasn't even secured or anything. They immediately screamed at him and cleared the area of other personnel. They asked him what the frick he was thinking, and he was absolutely convinced that only the pressure of a tank running over the mine could have detonated it. He was very wrong. It could have gone off while it was bouncing around in the bed of the vehicle. He wouldn't listen, and he was absolutely convinced that he was correct. Fricking moron is lucky to be alive. Well, he survived that ordeal but probably got himself killed at some point after the fact. My buddy and his team moved the mine to a safe location and blew it in place. My coworkers do stupid things, but not to things that actually blow up. Wow. I used to run a pub, and there's a classic saying. Everyone knows how to do two jobs, their own and running a pub. I work for a tea shop. Before this, I worked in another tea shop in Britain. I once had a customer insist that green tea was caffeine-free. It's not, if you were wondering. I'd like to clear up a few misconceptions about tea, but first I would like to state that I'm not a scientist. I'm in no way a scientific expert regarding tea. I've worked in the tea business for the last 6 years, and I've had extensive training and I'm passionate about it. However, I do admit that I don't know everything there is to know about tea. However, I do know the following. 1. All tea comes from the same plant called Camellia sinensis. The flavor, properties, caffeine content changes depending on where and how it's grown, and then more importantly, how it is processed is what changes the type of tea, like black, green, yellow, oolong, white, etc. 2. Since all tea comes from the same plant, all tea has caffeine in it. The caffeine content changes based on the above methods, but also it can change every year on soil acidity, rainfall, and other things. It also changes by which leaves and which part of the leaves are used to make the tea. 3. Tea has far less caffeine than coffee. 4. Matcha tea is a green tea that's slowly grown in the shade in Japan and naturally produces more caffeine. It's then finely ground, and because of that, the consumer is ingesting everything from that plant rather than just infusing tea leaves in water, which take out some of the nutrients from the leaves. 5. Not being a scientist, I have no idea about this rinsing a tea bag method to lower the caffeine content, but I've heard it mentioned throughout the years. However, the longer you brew your cup of tea, the more caffeine you'll get out of it, so you can draw your own conclusions there. 6. If you think green tea and white teas are bitter, you're brewing them too long. No more than 3 minutes, and try to get the temperature of the water around 79 to 82 degrees Celsius or 175 to 80 Fahrenheit. If you don't have a way of telling the temperature, just let your kettle sit for a minute or two after it boils. And 7. Rooibos is a caffeine-free plant that is grown in South Africa. It has a very distinctive flavor that people either love or hate. Try it with honey and adding your own spices, and it's divine. Also, if you love milky tea, ignore the snobs and drink it like you normally would black tea. Lawyer here. Someone just told me I was a butthole because I wouldn't answer a real estate question involving a document I'd never heard of for a deal in a jurisdiction I don't practice in. They told me I had to know about it and I was just being difficult. Medical laboratory technician here. A patient told me that the blood services in our state have him on speed dial because his blood was needed to save all newborn babies. So I said, "Oh, you must be O negative," and he replied very seriously, "No, I'm O positive." When I explained that he probably was mistaken, he got very loud and condescendingly told me he's been donating for years and that if I'd paid more attention in school, I'd know the basics of how blood works. My money on well-trained professionals who consistently get told how to do their jobs by absolute morons is absolutely on medical personnel, but I might be jaded by how many videos we've done on ridiculous hospital cases. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I mainly do logos for small businesses and the like, and the amount of people who ask me to give them discounts because they could do it is absolutely ridiculous. Don't even get me started on people explaining to me why doing work for them for free will help me in the long run. I'm a mechanic by trade. A guy I know bought an older European sports car to fix up. It doesn't run, so he got it cheap. I told him that it's definitely going to cost him way more than he thinks, and it's not going to be easy for him to do it himself, not to mention the difficulties of finding parts for it. He'd probably save money if he just bought a new one. He just blew me off and gave me some strange twisted reasoning about how he can do it cheaper and make it better. Okay dude, whatever. So far he's sunk thousands of dollars into it, and it still doesn't run. I believe that he's pretty well invested into the sunk cost fallacy at this point. Goodbye retirement fund. My dad tried convincing a biology student of the importance of cryptozoology and the existence of Bigfoot. Bartender. I'm consistently amazed at how little people know about alcohol. I've got a million stories, but there's one request I've been getting a lot lately. My bar has a Long Island variation that's essentially a shot each of tequila, vodka, rum, and gin, along with peach schnapps, Sprite, and 2 very sugary fruit juices, topped with grenadine. People have been requesting this drink without the grenadine because they think that extra sugar is what's making them hungover. Nah man, you're hungover because you just took 4 shots and consumed 80 grams of sugar. Trust me, that 1/4 ounce of grenadine is not going to make up the difference. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm a commercial property manager. In certain commercial leases, it's the tenant's responsibility to maintain plumbing, HVAC, etc., so you don't call your manager and demand your bulbs need to be replaced or toilets leaking like you would in a residential. One of my properties had a main meter from the city, then sub-meters to the individual suites. Our meters were monitored and billed by a third party who would then let us know if a tenant's usage had spiked. We'd let the tenant know that they probably needed to investigate since something on their side of the meter was possibly leaking. We notified the tenant. He freaks out and tells us nothing is leaking. He freaks out further when his bill is 4 times higher. I tell him again, maybe you should get a plumber to investigate. He says he doesn't need a plumber because he's a water engineer. Side note, his business was one of those mailbox stores in a shopping center. Turns out his toilet was running. I'm a music producer and engineer and studio instrumentalist, and it's amazing how many of the artists I work with, many of whom are talented singers but have no knowledge of music theory or recording, think that they know better than me about it. It slows down an already tremendous process. I'm a water professional. I've been told numerous times that there are no asbestos water pipes. I've been told that would be illegal and unethical. Asbestos concrete pipes are one of the most common types of water and sewer pipes. When I bought a house, people told me not to bother with an asbestos check because
It's been banned for decades.
1. It's only been banned since 2003, and 2. The house was built in the 80s. I'll leave it up to the professionals to tell me. I had someone argue with me that vaccines gave their child Down syndrome. Yep, injecting unsuspecting babies with extra chromosomes. I'm a radio presenter. I once spent 15 minutes at a dinner listening to a woman tell me that I didn't work on a certain radio station, that I'd worked on for 6 years. It was honestly the maddest thing I've ever heard.
No, it's not that one.
And if you really don't understand, don't worry, me neither. I once had a lady call my house 5 times in 2 minutes asking for some random person, even though I'd told her she had the wrong number and that it was only my wife and I that lived there. She said, absolutely livid,
Excuse me, I do not have the wrong number.
I sell tickets at a ski resort. Last Monday we had a Rotary night where tickets are cheaper than normal and all proceeds go to charity. Tickets were $25, but if you bought them online they were $20. This one lady came up and asked for a ticket and I told her the price was $25. She got super angry and insisted that they were $20. I show her on my computer how much they are when I ring a ticket up. She claims that nowhere online does it say that the $20 tickets are online only. So I pull up our website and show her that it does indeed say that the $20 ticket is online only. At this point, she's raised her voice at me and tells me that it didn't say the same thing earlier that day, which everyone I work with knew it did. She makes me call a manager and she says the exact same thing to her and explains to her that these tickets are normally $72 and she's saving money today anyway. Plus, all proceeds go to charity. She gets angrier and states that she isn't here for charity, we normally aren't open on Mondays or Tuesday nights anyways. My manager proceeds to tell her that there's nothing we can do about the price change and that she can either buy a pass or not. She goes to find her family and comes back with her husband, who tries to say the same things. I don't make enough money to deal with this sort of crap. I'm a standard small shop barista and once a girl asked me to make her hot chocolate with a shot of espresso, which is what a mocha is since we use the same chocolate powder for both types of drinks. I tell her, oh, do you mean a mocha? If I charge you for a hot chocolate plus the extra shot, it will be more expensive than if I just charge you for a mocha, ma'am. She proceeds to tell me that she knows more about coffee and that the two are totally different due to the different ways we prepare the chocolate. Instead of arguing with her, I go ahead and make her the drink, but I'd already written the M for mocha on her drink label. When I hand her the drink, she proceeds to get massively angry and demand that I remake her drink like she said, a hot chocolate with an extra shot. So I go back to the bar and basically just put her old drink into a new cup with HC for hot chocolate. She takes a sip and goes,
Yep, much better.
The narrator feels that one. I can't say too much, but I've made a lot of coffees in my time and people's placebo can be very intoxicating to them.
Pediatric nurse.
So I love hearing how bad vaccines are and how medications are toxins and chemicals, how effective essential oils are, and how the fact that each nurse does certain things a little different means that it must be wrong. NICU nurse here, and I just love when the mum who did substances during her pregnancy refuses vaccines because they're toxic or dangerous. Sure, lady, some of these mums also love to tell you that the reason their kid is fussy is because you're failing to do something as their nurse, change the diaper or feed him enough. It couldn't possibly be because their child is withdrawing. I'm not saying that all mothers who do substances are like this. Some of them realize the harm they did and really try to help their baby and get help for themselves. Pharmacist. Have had more than one person try to convince me that their liver was special and that they'd developed a tolerance to enormous doses of Tylenol. Pro tip: you don't develop a tolerance to acetaminophen, and nobody gets to exceed 4,000 milligrams per day. Mostly these patients have developed a tolerance to hydrocodone and are looking for ridiculous fills of Vicodin. Sir, Dr. A has given you the maximum dosage. I cannot fill the prescription form from Dr. B.
Frick you, my liver is special.
And the runner-up, pick anything said by Dr. Oz. Screw Dr. Oz. I'm also a pharmacist. Every damn January, I have to spend all day explaining to people how their insurance works while they shake their heads and say no repeatedly. If I had a nickel for every butthole who swears that they've never had a deductible or insists a drug is covered by their insurance and therefore I'm wrong to collect a copay, I'd be able to afford to follow my dream, putting up giant billboards outside of Dr. Oz's home, studio, and hospital that all say, F Dr. Oz. Back in my barista days, I worked part-time at Borders. One night, a guy came in and asked for a cappuccino. I made it and he took it to go, add sugar, and came back with the snottiest attitude, asking why I didn't put whipped cream on it. I explained that whipped cream wasn't standard on a cappuccino, and he insisted that it was. I offered to put some whipped cream on it, but that wasn't sufficient. He berated me for not knowing how to make a proper cappuccino, and he lived in Seattle for years and knew coffee better than I did. Finally, I got annoyed and pointed out where he could find books about coffee and told him if he could find one that said a cappuccino was generally made with whipped cream, I'd give him a cookie. He said, "You're on," and stomped off in the direction of the books, and I never saw him again, jerk. My mum was having intermittent trouble with her internet connection. I'm in IT, and as all people in IT know, you become the family tech person. I went to investigate. Mum had a network cable running from her computer to an extra modem under her desk. The modem was connected to a coax cable running from the wall. Her house already had a modem and a wireless router. I asked her why she had a second modem under her desk. She told me that she'd complained to the man who'd installed her dishwasher that her internet wasn't working well. He had offered to take a look, and finding an extra modem in the basement fixed the problem for her. None of this really bothered me as much as how hard I had to argue with her that this wasn't helping. She was convinced that because she trusted the guy, he had to be right. She finally relented when, face in my hands, I groaned, "I do this for a fricking living." So I'm getting a few questions. First off, my stepdad had a home office that he actually worked out of, so I set up the modem and router in that office so that all of his devices could be hardwired. Since he was actually working on the internet, he took priority. Mum just casually surfed. But yeah, connecting directly to your router is great if you can do it, especially 15 years ago when wireless wasn't as reliable. Second, think of a modem as a doorway to the internet's world. The router just splits off access to that door so that multiple devices can go through it. And each door or modem has a key called a MAC address that your service provider needs so that you can walk through that door, but the world doesn't start until the line from your house hits the pole. So knowing this, a second door won't get you to the world any faster, and it certainly won't work without giving your ISP its key, MAC address. Even if you could get it to work, which I don't think you could, it would be like putting a second front door on your house. So basically, the modem under Mum's desk was just a powered-on brick that was talking to nothing. I hope that explains things, but maybe someone out there can do a better job of it. Oh, and also, the issue was a crappy aftermarket wireless card in Mum's PC that was a finicky beast. But it was so long ago I can't remember if I replaced it or suggested that she get a newer PC, or hers was near the end of her life. I think I also just moved the router a little. I did a lot of work for them over the years, it's hard to remember all the fixes. Oh, and my stepdad would slip me a $50 every now and again because he knew that, at the time, desktop support charged about $80 an hour. It was a nice gesture and filled my beer fridge. I'm a tattoo artist. I had a client try and tell me how I should go about tattooing color. She was completely wrong, by the way, and she wouldn't believe me when I tried to explain how tattooing actually worked because her cousin told her how it is. Also had someone tell me once that they thought tattooing seemed pretty easy and that they could probably do pretty well at it because they decorated cakes at Hy-Vee. Lawyer. And most clients are fine, but about 5% act like they know the law better than you because they did a Google search or read a Wikipedia article. I'll say, we can sue for A and B and not C or D. The client,
Why can't we sue for C? I read something that says we can.
I've researched on it and it's not supported by the law and we'd lose.
Put it in anyway.
I can't put in things we can't defend, they'll just get thrown out anyway and it will turn the judge off to our good claims if we include a lot of junk claims.
I don't think you're doing everything you can to win my case. Maybe I'll find another lawyer.
I love when clients who are in custody tell me the legal advice their cellmates gave them, insisting that the advice is a viable option to get them out of jail. I always ask, is your cellmate a lawyer? Or, if your cellmate's plan is so solid, why is he still in jail? What's the most awkward thing you've witnessed at a high school reunion? Not me, but my brother-in-law's high school reunion. A guy that was severely bullied in high school started a Facebook group to get the ball rolling on planning a high school reunion. He planned the venue, food, drinks, and asked everyone to pay a ticket price to cover it all. He organized the money to go into a provided bank account, received more than 200 people's dollary dues, and then effed off. Never to be heard of again. I've never laughed so hard in my life. My mum's 35th high school reunion was at a bar that I frequent quite a bit. I walked in with my mum and went up to a bartender that I know to order a drink for my mum and I. He looked up at my mother and I and immediately got super shy and weird and then said, "You're the daughter of," my mum's name. Apparently he'd had a huge crush on my mum in high school and my uncle beat the crap out of him because he creeped my mum out. It was very awkward indeed. I'm getting kind of a Peter Baelish Game of Thrones vibe. Did he creep on you or treat you different after that? I play in a band. We got booked by a restaurant for some class reunion. I showed up to set up for the gig and it was my frickin' class. I wasn't even invited.
Hey everyone, before we start, I'd like to dedicate this first song to my high school class with this message. Frick you, and frick you twice for not inviting me to the class reunion. Also, frick you guys.
I went to my wife's last reunion a few months ago. The day of the reunion, she got a call that it was cancelled. Apparently 5 years earlier, a classmate got creepy and stalkery with another classmate. The people organizing the reunion invited him to not show up. Then the guy posted on Facebook some vague threats. They did actually change the venue and have the reunion, but there were many people that couldn't be contacted with the updated info. Nothing. And by nothing, I mean the awkward feeling at being one of the 12 who showed up. Graduated in 1962 and never went to any of the reunions. Didn't even know about them until the 50th in 2012. I'd been in the odd places of the world. Encountered a classmate 50 years later. He gave me the roster. Most of the people who went had never left the small farm town. Of the people who could be tracked, over half the males were dead. Vietnam, substances, transmissible diseases, and all the random bullcrap. I was nobody in high school, but I still seemed to be on the green side of the dirt. My friend said her cousin's high school reunion was really awkward because this guy ran up and kissed his high school girlfriend without her asking, and then got in a fistfight with her husband. It didn't turn out well from what I hear. There has to be a balance between boring evening and fistfights and drunken disasters. I'm so glad the latter are so present here for our entertainment. 2 of our classmates passed away before our 5-year reunion. One of the girls organizing the event thought it would be a good idea to make cardboard cutouts of their faces as if they were truly still here with us. The worst part was that people got drunk and started toting them around, taking pictures with them. It was messed up. A guy from our class passed away from cancer shortly before our 20th reunion. He was never super popular but was pretty well known across our class. During the awards and speech section of the night, the lady, our class president I think, was trying to get the crowd to settle down for a moment of silence. You could tell it meant a lot to her as she was starting to get heated. The crowd started shushing one another and it got just quiet enough to hear somebody say,
"Geez, did somebody die or something?"
When I was about 6, I went to my dad's small-town school's 30-year reunion. His ex-fiancée, not my mum, was dressed in her prom dress and kept talking to me, saying she should have been my mummy. Even then, I knew that was weird. Keep your crazy inside, lady. 10-year reunion held at a bar owned by a former classmate. Started at 10 p.m. The owner told people adults over 21 only. People said they needed to bring their kids and were told no. Several people brought their babies and toddlers anyway. Parents drank like teenagers and the kids ran wild. Owner called the cops, who watched the parents be negligent. Parents escorted out by same cops and their kids were taken out by others. For some clarification, original reunion was going to be at our high school but less than 20 people bought tickets, so it was cancelled. A lot of us live not too far and see each other out and about anyway. We had a Facebook group up for the event, so when it was cancelled, the bar owner agreed to have something at his place, but we had to follow the law since it was a bar and not a restaurant, like no one under 21. He did ask people to leave with their kids and was cursed out. I heard one girl spat on him, so he called the cops. One of my friends, who was an organizer for the original event, tried watching the kids and she pointed out their parents to the cops when they arrived. The classmates were really drunk to the point they couldn't have driven their kids home, and others were belligerent. Hence the arrests. I was there with a friend when he saw his ex. They approached each other, him going in for a hug and her extending her hand to shake. When they each realized what the other was doing, she put her arms out for a hug and he extended his hand to shake. By the time they touched, it was just a jumble of hands and arms weirdly touching each other. He started by saying, "So, how have you been?" And I just said, excuse me, and got the heck away from that. A girl I like, we work at different facilities but hang out a lot at trainings, came down for an audit. She introduced me to someone she's training and we talk for a bit until they have to leave. She invites me to join all of them for dinner and I say cool. I go for a hug and she sticks her hand out and we both sort of back up and flip our actions, so I stick my hand out and she goes for the hug. We hug and it was awkward. That night at dinner, we're joking, we all have a few drinks and I excuse myself for the night. She stands up from the table and her arms start to open up, but I instinctively reach out to shake her hand. The guy she's training has a huge grin as she turns red in the face, shakes my hand and says goodnight. At my 10-year high school reunion, a guy I hated and who hated me showed up and came directly towards me. Not saying anything at all to me, he then engaged the person standing right next to me on my left. He proceeded to move around the room talking to literally everyone there, only 33 people in my class, and stopping with the person on my right. Didn't so much as acknowledge my existence the whole rest of the day. It was super weird at the time, but many years later it was the most memorable thing that happened. I laugh about it now. At my 10th, the organizers gave awards to people for various reasons. One girl from our class was given an award for having the most kids of anyone there. She had had 4 by different guys, which was part of the announcement. The look on her face as she slinked up to the podium said it all. At mine, someone made a speech along the lines of, "To all those that felt picked on or bullied, I have something to say to you." She then started to sing "Let It Go" from Frozen. A kid in my class, 1982, was hit by a car during our junior year and wound up in a persistent vegetative state. We had heard bits and pieces of information about him over the years, but none of it sounded reliable. He was dead, he was still in a coma, he'd come out of it, he was normal, he'd become a born-again Christian, he lived at home and couldn't do anything for himself. You name it, we had heard it. Every reunion, there's still some misinformation being passed around about the guy. In our 10-year reunion program, he was in the in memoriam page. Then it was pointed out that he wasn't dead. Last fall, we had our 35th reunion and he was announced along with the "Let's take a minute to remember our departed classmates," and then others pointed out that they thought he was still alive and living in Florida now. I don't think we'll ever find out the truth. Not that it matters though, he was a fricking jerk anyway. I wonder if the truth will ever be known about the Floridian man of mystery. Or maybe the author is the reason he's missing and is covering his tracks. The captain of the football team was a pretty sad sight. He looked like hell and was so proud of sneaking booze in with his flask. I mean, it was a cash bar, but the prices were reasonable, guys. Mine is in a few months, but the awkwardness has already started. First, I never had any plans to go. Things like that really aren't my speed. I'm not a mingler and I always want to leave right away. Besides, I'll be away on military orders by that time anyway, so there's no way I can go. So a few weeks ago, I get added to a high school 10-year reunion page for my school on Facebook by someone I don't recognize. I immediately think, nope, and leave the page. Then don't think about it again. I got a phone call a few days later from an unknown number. Not unusual since a lot of people call me for work stuff. I answer and get this really enthusiastic, "Oh my god, hi, it's name. How are you?" I apologize and tell her I think she's got the wrong number. I don't know anyone with that name. She says my whole name and says she's got my number from a friend from high school. She was the class president, but to be honest, I don't remember her. She asks about the reunion. I politely tell her I'm not going, I have other obligations. She says, "I don't know if that will work, I'll be in touch," and hangs up. I'm like, what the frick, but whatever. A few days later, I get added back to the same group by her, and again, I leave it. Not 30 minutes later, I get another call from her. She wants to know why I left the group again, and again I tell her I have other obligations. She told me that, "You don't skip reunions, we've planned this for years, you'll be there." So sarcastically I said, "Okay, well, save me a spot then," and hung up. A third time I'm added to this group, I'm like, for frick's sake, and I leave again. I get a call and this time she's calling to tell me that my ticket and dinner money are due by the end of the week. I politely remind her that I'm not going. She gets snooty and informs me that the venue and catering have already been reserved and that I will need to pay for my meal as the fund wouldn't cover it. Once again, I remind her that I was never attending and that it wasn't my fault she had paid in advance without a proper count. She then told me, "You don't have a choice. I've already paid for you, so you have to be there." I said, "All right, bye." Wrong name. and then hung up again. I ended up blocking her on Facebook, ignoring her calls, and leaving the group 2 more times when other members of the reunion committee added me back in. In short, class president that I don't remember won't take no for an answer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Probably the reunion itself. Our 10-year was in 2015 and I did not attend as I got roped into helping salvage a 4-wheeler from the river that a couple of buddies had found. If you're interested, the guy who kept it got it running again for about $1,000 worth of parts and work hours. Score! So for about 3 or 4 months leading up to the reunion date, a few of the popular girls from our class started a Facebook group to organize everything, and it seemed to be going really well. People had moved all over the country but were saying they were moving their schedules around to attend. There was talk of renting an event hall on the fairgrounds. One girl's family now owned a local restaurant and offered to put up that venue for an after-hours thing. Everyone seemed really into it, and from what I could see, all seemed ready and willing to put behind them whatever petty grudges and high school BS had existed 10 years before. Comes to the morning of, and absolutely no one has committed anything, and in fact it's almost complete radio silence on the Facebook group. Someone suggests that since we have no place reserved, should everyone just meet at bars downtown or go from there? So it was that exactly 7 people showed up and played oversized Jenga. They at least looked like they had a good time, but what a letdown. I was initially a bit bummed about knowing I was missing our reunion, but when I saw the turnout on Facebook when I got back into cell range, I wasn't that disappointed anymore. That's not too different from mine. We'd planned an event, but apparently the turnout wasn't high enough to cover the cost of the place. That fell through, and one of the organizers made a melodramatic post in the Facebook group, and another organizer put together a small gathering plan for whoever showed up to get dinner. Got 6 of my class plus a girlfriend of one of the guys, had dinner, and then we all hung out at one person's apartment for a couple of hours reminiscing. I think that was probably more fun than the original plan would have been, to be honest. At my 10-year reunion, it was more everyone getting really drunk. At the 20th, there were a few people seemingly bitter at those who'd done pretty well in life. Odd, really. When my lady teacher came up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she loved me. She was very drunk. I felt very awkward. No, she wasn't hot. She was old, once spell-corrected a Christmas card I gave her, and the night of the formal smelled strongly of booze. Haven't had a high school reunion yet, but here's a fun one from my mum's 3rd reunion. She went with my dad back to her hometown for the reunion. My dad grew up in a different place, so he didn't know anybody there. Bored out of his mind, he decided to have some fun and found a way to discreetly ask someone who the biggest juvenile delinquent troublemaker was in their graduating class. Let's call him Albert Davis. So my dad went to the name tag table and found Albert Davis's name tag. He put it on and went around saying hi to everyone just to watch their reactions, because most of them assumed that Albert Davis was in prison. My mum did not think it was funny.
Allow me to introduce my partner, the one in our year voted most likely to end up in prison.
Excellent prank. Apparently every year my brother's graduating class gets together at this one neighborhood bar over Thanksgiving. It's not a formal thing, but anyone can come and they all have a few drinks and it's totally normal. I literally had no idea about it, and apparently my brother didn't either. Because 3 or 4 years ago, we showed up to get a drink together alone and his entire graduating class of 50-ish people were there. Now, my brother was super nerdy and kind of an awkward kid, but the Marines and college turned that around and now he's an outgoing, sociable guy. Coming out of the closet once he hit 23 helped too, since he was comfortable in his own skin and it showed outwardly. Thing was, no one seemed to know he was gay. And this is small town in the Midwest, where there's nothing else to do but gossip, and since no one leaves, everyone knows everyone else. I literally spent all night cringing while my brother dodged the advances of a bunch of girls aggressively hitting on him. Since the dating pool is the same guys they went to high school with and he was fresh meat, they were all coming on super strong and it was bad. Then everything got worse when he told them he was living on the East Coast because he was gay and married, and his husband's job was there. I went with my wife to her reunion. I may have had 1 or 3 before arriving, and when I got there I remembered hearing a story about a guy who was my wife's 3rd grade boyfriend. Later in life he'd had a rough time of things. Substances, booze, run-ins with the law, and other things. As a joke, I wrote his name on my name badge and went about my business. Not long after, a rather strong and stocky woman turned around, looked at me, then at my name tag, and when she saw the name, she looked up at me and screamed excitedly, as loud as I've ever heard, and bear hugged me while lifting me off the ground and bit my neck. No blood, but a decent bruise. At my 10-year reunion, one of the good-looking but not very bright guys from my class argued with me that we had done the deed in high school. After 10 minutes of me trying to explain to him that we had never done the deed, I realized he was thinking of my friend's sister, not me. He was then like, "Well, we can fix that." I declined and left. He had gone 10 years not knowing who he had done the deed with. I'm not touching that with someone else's downstairs area, much less my own. Got invited by Facebook message, we're not friends on Facebook, by one of the girls who made pretty much the whole time I was there a living hell. Didn't attend obviously because everyone I wanted to keep in touch with I did. But got a, sorry we missed you, hun, we should do lunch soon message. But why? Selective memory or… Went to a wife's reunion, introduced myself as George Michael. I was only there 3 weeks, I was bullied so I left, but so-and-so invited me. Some people actually bought the story. There's a slight recurring theme of husbands being hilarious goofballs, and I kinda love it. It was a party with all old high school people at it, not sure if people actually have reunions anymore, but it ended up with the same effect. I met up with an ex, and an ex-buddy of mine kept saying crap about how we would be perfect back together. It was just stupid for a ton of reasons, and the dude kept pushing. First, I was married. Didn't bother this dude, he said we should just bang and not tell my wife. Second, she's a lesbian, no interest in men. I knew this already and she had trusted telling me even though I think she kept it private. But this guy pushed and pushed, and when she said she liked girls, he just told her to bring her girlfriend along. I don't even know the guy's endgame, but he looked like a total moron and I'm pretty sure he made my ex feel pretty uncomfortable. Then I had to feel uncomfortable when I finally told him to F off. For us younger folk, there will even be a physical reunion. Someone made a graduating class of 2000 and X, like a year after graduation, which had one post every few months and then had been absolutely dead for several years now. The lighting was dim, we were old, and some nitwit decided to let people scrawl their own name tags, which then hung on lanyards at crotch level. Nobody could hear anything over the snot-nosed DJ blasting Eye of the Tiger, and trying to figure out who you were talking to was pretty awkward. My wife at the time and I had dated all through high school and college. We married and had a child. We still had a few close friends we graduated with that were going as well. I would say that there was about a 70% turnout. We had a good time and everyone got pretty drunk. We all mingled and my wife talked to a guy who she had cheated on me with right after high school. They didn't speak for more than 3 minutes. They hadn't spoke since that day almost 10 years before. We had moved past it and had a family. At least that's what I thought. Less than a month after the reunion, I could tell that something wasn't right. When I asked her about it, she told me she wasn't happy and wanted a divorce. We'd been together a very long time and I was devastated. After a week of feeling like I'd failed and doing everything I could to win her back, I discovered she'd been having an affair with that same guy. Not my high school reunion, but my mother's. She walked in and was saying hi to a few of the women when one of them dragged their husband over. In a very loud voice, she said, "You remember Sharon? Her brother was the one that fired you last month." My mum ended up avoiding them the rest of the night. I heard that a classmate set the venue on fire. Glad I didn't go. It was lit though. Actually, my high school reunion was the awkward thing. I didn't attend and neither did very many people. Everyone pretty much hated each other, and from what I heard, only one clique turned up, with the odd person from 1 or 2 others making an appearance. Even though I didn't go, it was still awkward when a guy who severely bullied me at school tried adding me on Facebook to invite me to the reunion. She still hates me to this day, so I don't even know why she would have wanted me there, let alone directly contacted me. At our 15th, they asked, then gave out prizes for the person who traveled the farthest to attend, traveled the least far to attend, had the newest car, the oldest car, the youngest child. The look on the MC's face when he realized what he was asking for the oldest child would mean was priceless. Had a 10-year reunion last year. Things were going well at this low-key local bar. Things shut down about 1 a.m. However, everyone is having fun and doesn't want to shut it down. Turns out the old school captain, a smart guy, not particularly socially intelligent though, says we should head back to his place to kick on. Tells the whole grade, 100 to 150 people, to drink what they want, including his dad's blue label scotch, which he thought was the cheap stuff. Ended up costing him several thousand, and apparently his dad, rather understandably, wasn't stoked. Feel bad for him, but I have to laugh. I remember even trying to warn him on the night, but he was riding that social popularity endorphin high, I suspect. I was in the first integrated high school class in 1971. For our 10-year reunion, the organizers did not invite any of the black students. I haven't been back. 5-year reunion. Basically, it boiled down to, what do you do for work? And if you had anything lucrative, people wanted to be your best friend and try to get connections. What are your worst and weirdest experiences with dating apps? He made me watch his homemade rap videos and tried to like his own Facebook page on my phone. Met at a coffee shop, she's there early. I order my drink, sit down, and she looks at me, and this is her first sentence. Let's cut to the chase. I need a father for my 4 sons. I got up and left. Just like their actual fathers, huh? I met a girl for a date who turned out to be much better looking than her photos, which is always a nice surprise. The date went well, just dinner and a walk, and we said our goodbyes. The next day, she invited me out to a friend's birthday party downtown as her +1. I wanted to go, but I had to work the next day and wanted to be able to drink a little since it was a bunch of people I didn't know. She said, "That's all right, you can park at my house and sleep over." Cha-ching! So of course I said yes. Fast forward to the middle of the party, I'm enjoying myself, chatting it up with her friends and having a good time, and the next thing I know she absolutely loses it and storms out of the bar, leaving me there, drunk, with her friends. I still have no idea why. One of them told me she wants you to go after her, and I said, frick that, it's our second date, which not a single person blamed me for. I stayed at the party and switched to water while I continued talking with her friends. That was over a year ago, and I still regularly hang out with them. They've since stopped talking to her. 2-date relationship and you got custody. Good job. Perfectly nice date. 20 minutes into it, she says, "I'll be honest, I know what I need in a man, and you don't have it." At 25, I would have been crushed, wondering what it was would have kept me up for days. Being 35, I thanked her for being blunt and was happy to have an unexpectedly free evening. I'll be totally honest, at 45 I would have greatly appreciated her honesty and then cried myself to sleep that night. Regardless of anything else, I would have felt like a complete failure, but I would have respected her honesty. I completely sympathize with both of these viewpoints. I guess it depends on how much I like the person and how high my hopes are after a first date. In my 30s, I'm still not immune to the whole getting starry-eyed after one date effect. Not me, but my friend went on a really great Tinder date a few months ago. She said they really seemed to hit it off. They got some margaritas, had a fun but very deep conversation about life and other philosophical things, and then made out a little bit. She didn't hear from him for the rest of the weekend, which felt odd because she had such a great feeling about him. She usually has a good radar for these things. She ended up stalking him on Facebook to see what he was up to. He'd self-deleted. She was lying about her age and wanted a baby, starting immediately. Okay, to elaborate, the profile said she was 19 and she was really, really freaking hot, so I was pretty interested. We text and talk on the phone. She does cutesy, kinda immature stuff, but I blow it off, thinking she's just awkward at flirting. One night, we're texting and she starts sending me pictures. And these were quite adult in nature, so now I'm extremely interested in meeting up. She agrees, but on one condition: no protection. I'm curious about her medical history. I try to stay clean despite being a filthy man hussy, so I ask when she last got tested. "Oh, I haven't been to the doctor in a couple of years," she says. So I inquire how she has birth control, and of course, she doesn't. Turns out she saw that I was a single dad and just assumed I'd be okay with siring another offspring. She was wrong. She got extremely upset and originally begged me to reconsider and that she needed a child in her life. When I remained unwilling, she dropped the bombshell. She was 17 and more than willing to go to the cops about the pictures I had on my phone if I didn't give her a baby. Delete, delete, delete every freaking thing and block her right there and immediately. I don't have Tinder anymore. We went out for drinks and then walked around the park, and it was an enjoyable date. I took her home and parked next to her apartment. She said I shouldn't park there because I'll get towed. I said I only need 3 minutes to walk you to your door. She said, seriously, you should park in visitors since you can stay all night and not get towed. I responded, oh, don't worry, I only need 3 minutes to walk you to your door. I'm not a smart man. We went to her place, ate some special fungi, and then did the deed. She was a biter, and it was like doing the deed with a giant spider. Needless to say, I didn't have a great time, and she kicked me out. I sat in my car outside for 2 long hours, tripping on shrooms and trying to come to terms with what felt like dying. Woke up the next morning with large bite marks. Never do shrooms with strange Tinder girls. Funny. I went on an OkCupid date. We ate the same special fungi. We had a great dinner, great convo, and made out at his place. He pushed for more, but I was trying to take a new, slow approach. 10 minutes later, I'm sitting in my car in his apartment parking lot, mildly tripping and looking at the pretty lights and thinking about how time works.
He never called me again. All in all, not the worst, but certainly not the best. Mushrooms and online dating, maybe not.
Met with a girl who ended up being 16. I was 18 at the time. She told me how, on her last date, the guy drove her to a secluded area and told her she had to give him head or he wouldn't drive her home, and she asked me not to do that to her. I took her home immediately and never met another girl online again. It kinda sounds like she's got you beat for the worst Tinder story, to be honest. My profile picture is a toilet. The first time I met a girl, we actually talked about toilets for an hour.
Your pic is a toilet and you got a match? Thanks for rubbing it in.
Not an awful date, but after I told him I wasn't interested in pursuing it further, he insisted I left my socks at his place, and I had to get them because
they look like really nice socks and I'm sure you'd want them back.
This went on for several days. Obviously, it was a weird ploy to get me back to his house. I just think he could have thought of something way better. I mean, it was winter, so clearly I put my socks and shoes back on before leaving. He showed up with his iPhone on a lanyard around his neck, but he introduced me to Reddit, so I guess it went okay. And I should really thank him because I met my fiancé on Reddit and he's in the process of moving halfway around the world for me. Friend from class matched with my then girlfriend, now ex. He informed me of the match and proceeded to set up a coffee date. Instead of him showing up to the date, I did. I had the pleasure of watching my girlfriend freak the F out. I mean, I hope that she became your ex minutes after this encounter and that you didn't both get stuck in an absolutely poisonous relationship of mistrust and nastiness afterwards. I have a doozy. So last year, after getting out of a horrible sort of relationship, I decided to try something casual and use Tinder. Got lots of responses and everything was going well. The dates were mostly lackluster and I figured I was just being too picky. So I decided that the next 5 people to ask me on dates get a yes. Bad move. So the first guy I go on a date with wants me to drive into the city, 45 minutes away, so we would have more stuff to do. Annoying, but sort of understandable, as I'm in a suburb without much exciting things. We meet, and he looks like his pictures. We say hello, and he tells me that we're going to go play soccer in the park. Cool, I love sports. On the way, we start talking and asking questions about each other, and I'm getting the vibe that we aren't such a great match. I love to travel, and he has zero desire. He only likes obscure sports, and I love them all. But hey, I'm here, stick with it. The entire time he talks about how he makes so much money and how embarrassing it is for his friend to only make $60K a year at his dream job. I make half of that. I would have left considering the love connection or lack thereof, but I figured I'd be polite until after lunch. We head out and we arrive. Dollar taco, which don't get me wrong, we don't have to splurge, but he looked me up and down and said, "You've got to earn your meal first," and gave me a creepy freaking smile. Nope. I feign a fake cell phone call and have to leave, but he insists on walking me to my car. We get there and I try to shrug him off and get the frick out, but then it happens. He leans in for a kiss. But not just any kiss, open mouth, tongue out. And as he leans in, his crotch brushes against my leg. Unfortunately for him, the soccer shorts didn't conceal his raging, hard eggplant. So I did what any caught-off-guard girl would do. I accidentally laughed in his mouth. Oops. I was too awkward to say anything and just got in the car, driving away. Met up for a coffee after having quite a nice chat over Tinder for a few days. He sits down and says, "Hey, nice to meet you," then continues to pull out his laptop and sit there in complete silence for the next hour. I had nothing with me but my phone since I thought coffee date means conversation. Should have left sooner. So I show up at the coffee shop and the B-word was just sitting there with some guy that looked like her boyfriend. They just sat there on their laptops and phones while I drank my latte at a nearby table like an idiot.
I'm seriously considering that this is the actual story.
I met one absolute charmer after talking for a few weeks. After agreeing to meet at a nearby coffee shop, I show up right on time. 10 minutes later, I get a text from him to come outside. Seems sketchy, but there's people about, so why not? I stand directly in front and he appears out of nowhere in a hoodie. We walk a bit before he asks me to walk down a darkly lit street. I say I'm uncomfortable and he immediately starts walking away. I assume he's joking and call him, only to hear him screaming at me on the other end. He sends me a text a couple of days later insulting my hair and telling me to suck my big eggplant, you N-word, B-word. In all honesty, that's so sketchy I'd consider reporting that to the police. It really sounds like he's looking for victims, and he might have succeeded at some point. Just for people who are wondering, you can call the police on a non-emergency line and tell them the situation. It's not about getting the guy arrested, he didn't break the law, but it's about informing them in case they've had some other attacks or crimes that could be similar in nature. My wife once did this a couple of hours after having a similar experience.
Turns out they were looking for a guy who had the MO of the guy she described, and they wished she'd called them sooner, even though technically he didn't do anything illegal to my wife. I got matched with a friend of mine I was really interested in, and everything was really cool. We ended up dating a couple of months after the first night we spent together. Then she slept with one of my best friends. That wasn't really cool. If you want to be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Albert E. Roosevelt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My first date with this guy would have been his cat's funeral. Luckily, I had the common sense not to take it that far. I'd matched with a guy and we began to be hitting it off. So I gave him my cell number, and of course he became increasingly strange. He was telling me about his cat and how he was worried about her because she was very ill. Okay, I understand having a sick pet is sad. Then he began to tell me about their relationship and how she was always there for him. Yep, I'm close to my animals too, that's fine. But then he began discussing how he doesn't know what to do if his cat passes away, and how he might just self-delete unless I'd be willing to take his cat's place. No? After that, I stopped talking to him. He started messaging me furiously. He told me how his cat had died and he needed me to talk him through this. I expressed my condolences and tried to shake him off. He then proceeds to explain how we should meet up at his cat's funeral. I don't respond. I didn't intend on becoming a skin suit anytime soon. His last text to me was an angry ramble describing in graphic detail how it was to eat his cat's ashes. He consumed his cat. 1. When I was someone's Tinder nightmare. I got way too drunk, puked on myself, total blackout. 2. Tinder nightmare. Went on the date. 5 minutes into the conversation, he flips it to September 11th conspiracy theories and doesn't drop it, even after I explicitly state that the conversation is inappropriate. Told him later by text that I didn't think we were compatible. Cue 2 months of 3 a.m. phone calls where he pretends to be a furniture or renovation company that had problems delivering my order. To clarify, I asked politely for the subject to be changed before letting him know it was inappropriate. For those others who've expressed that this doesn't sit well with them, I guess it's good we're not dating? I think it's a healthy level of perspective to be able to admit that you've both had and been a nightmare date at some point in your life. We all go through stuff, people. There are some fun follow-ons to that second story. The fact that someone rationalized phoning at 3 a.m. pretending to be a furniture company makes me laugh. Hello, this is IKEA speaking. First date is going well. She's way out of my league and seems very much into me. Later, we're back at my place, after dinner and making out on the couch a little. We head into the bedroom and the clothes are coming off. Just as I'm about to slip it in, she says, "Wait, what? You should know I have herpes." Very funny. "No, I really do, and I'm in the middle of an outbreak." "You're joking." "I'm not. Do you need a minute?" Being fairly herpes naive, I reply, Yep. I go out to my porch and sit down on a chair. After a minute, I hear her crying in my bedroom. She dresses and comes out. She asks me if I need some time to think, and I tell her that I do. We talk a little about other things. I drive her home and then spend the weekend completely torn up, weighing my options. Is she worth getting herpes over? You've only known her for 6 hours. Ultimately, I go out with her a few more times, and it turns out not only does she have the herps, but she's bat crap crazy. I dump her, and she tries to self-delete. Another hilarious story in and of itself. And I test negative for herpes. Back to the drawing board. We went on 3 or 4 dates. I, 30-year-old male, was starting to get feelings and I liked this girl, 25. On our 4th date, she asked if I could watch her cat while she was moving apartments. I'm not a fan of cats. Sorry, YouTube, but I'm a nice guy and kept the cat in my home office. Long story short, she doesn't answer her phone for over a week and only picks up her cat when I sent a message saying it's going to the local shelter within 24 hours. Fricking Tinder. Matched with this guy, we talked for a little bit and we didn't really seem to have anything in common, so I didn't plan on going out with him. When I finally did decline, he threw a fit and pestered me, promising a lovely night out and to just give him a chance. That should have been my first clue. Now, at this point in my life, I was admittedly very picky about guys I'd go out with, and this guy, as well as my roommates, encouraged me to just go because maybe I'm missing out on a nice person. Fine. We go to sushi, no attraction, nothing in common, horrible conversation. Every time I tried to lead with a subject, he ended it. "What's your favorite restaurant?" "I don't know." "Do you play any sports?" "No." The conversation was a dead end at every turn. Had a terrible time. Good sushi, though. I insisted I pay half the bill and we walked out.
Then he grabbed me by the arm very aggressively, insisting we go to Starbucks for coffee. I said, no thank you, I just ate, I'm very full. I have a test tomorrow, whatever. But he literally overpowered me and pulled me in and sat us down at a table. Now I was freaked out. We sat awkwardly, silently. I asked, are you getting coffee or… He smiled and said, no, I don't want any. I said, okay, so why are we here? And he slipped his hand between my thighs and credit carded me under the table. I was mortified and moved away. I said, I'm going home now. I thank God I drove separately. As I got to my car, he asked, so when can we go out again? I almost laughed at him, but I was polite because I'm a huge wuss. I said, well, you're very nice. Lie. But we don't have much in common, and I don't really feel the chemistry, but thanks for showing me the new sushi restaurant. You're a fricking C-word. You're just the same as all women. I thought you were different, you dumb bimbo piece of crap. F you. I got in my car and left. When I got home, I had many texts from him and his roommate. From date guy, I got a lot of frick you, and from the roommate, I got a few angry and concerned ones like, my roommate came home really upset and teed off. What the frick did you do to him? You're a B-word. I literally had no idea people could be like that. It really soured my Tinder experience, but I had fun laughing at the texts with my roommates. We went on 3 dates. The next time she asked to see me, I told her I was visiting family and wouldn't be available until the following weekend. In that moment, she freaked out and sent me a 7-page-long text about how I destroyed what could have been a perfect relationship and that she wanted to marry me still if I would just put her first. She then left me a voicemail of her singing You've Got It Bad by Usher while crying and saying she loved me over and over. 2 days later, she sent me pictures of her burning a bucket list she had made for us. Kinda glad I got out of that one unscathed. Recently met this guy on Tinder and have been on 3 dates with him. First date went really well until his car got towed. Second date, we went to his place, got drunk and banged, ended up with protection stuck inside me, and proceeded to freak the frick out and had to go to ER. Third date, he got me high for the first time, got me way too high, freaked out again, and started pinching his chest really hard and speaking Thai. He added me on Facebook after that. 8 out of 10 would go on date again. I genuinely can't tell if this person is being sarcastic with the rating or not. It sounds like you guys had fun together, even if all 3 dates got weird on some level. I wonder if these two went on any more dates and what levels of destruction were unleashed. Were you able to speak Thai before getting high? I want to know too. I'd like to learn Thai and this sounds like the easiest way. I once went on a date with a woman who claimed she hadn't smoked green herb since like the 8th grade because once she started getting into white snow, what was the point? But now she was smoking to help with the nausea because her shrinks put her on lithium. It was a lot of info for the third sentence of a date. I met a girl on Tinder. I think I won her over with my jokes about loving dirty socks and old Greg. We talk for a while and finally decide to go to a lake. We both love nature. We go, meet, hug, and sit down on a blanket by the lake. We talk for a bit. About 10 minutes later, I hear a splat. She looks down and laughs. I look down at her leg. There, sitting on her right leg, is a big white, pebbly bird crap. I ask, did a bird just crap on your leg? She says yes and laughs again. Before the date, we'd promised no bullcrap. We must be ourselves. I don't think before I catch myself wiping the bird crap off her leg with my hand. I go to the lake, wash my hand off, and go and sit back down. We have a little laugh, talk for another couple of hours, and decide to call it a night. We go back to our cars, and I give her the goodbye. I wasn't sure if I should give her a hug or a kiss at this point. I didn't want to be invasive. As I'm hugging her and thinking about the kiss, I start to harden up down there. I regret the decision to wear athletic shorts. I think I have 2 options. 1, turn around after the hug and walk back to my car. 2, try to conspicuously tuck the little guy into my waistline of my athletic shorts and go for the kiss. I go for option 3. Things are happening down there. I can't keep hugging you. We laugh. I hug her again and say, I'll talk to you soon. We promised we'd be honest. But on my way back to my car, I just keep thinking, crap, too honest, too honest. I turn on my car and wait to see if she's going to leave first. Then she gets out of her car and walks towards me with something in her hands. I roll down my window. You forgot the banana bread I made for you. I couldn't believe I made her come back to the awkwardness to make her give me the banana bread she'd made for me. I take it from her, we both still laugh a bit about the boner thing, and I put the banana bread on the passenger seat. Then, and this is the part I still can't believe, she leans in, we kiss. A gentle, small, but amazing kiss. She walks back to her car and drives away. I do a couple of fist pumps and then drive home. On my way home, I start to question what the frick just happened. So much about myself to doubt, but so much greatness to it. What just happened? I'm driving home and Bohemian Rhapsody comes on. I have a Wayne's World moment. I will not let you go! Fast forward 3 months, we're still talking. I saw her tonight. We went to a creek again. We've gotten poison ivy from each other, been camping, shared great music. It's all been so great. I don't ever want to leave her. When we look back, she says I won her over when I wiped the bird crap off her leg. Needless to say, that bird was my wingman. And yeah, I read the title as Worst or Weirdest Experiences, but I've only gone on one Tinder date, so technically this is my worst Tinder experience. It's also my best. What's your latest, I don't want to live on this planet anymore moment? I watched a school bus run a red light at a 6-lane across major intersection this afternoon. Spoke to one of my newer employees regarding issues with her work. That evening, I received an email from her father asking to meet with me because his 23-year-old daughter came home upset. I'm not kidding. I mentioned a professor's teaching style that I don't care for to my mother. She sent him an email and he brought it up with me later. Single most embarrassing point of my academic career. I told my dad in a letter when I was in basic that one of the drill sergeants, though great at his job, also scared the ever-loving crap out of me. I got called into the captain's office and they played a voicemail my dad had left where he said, "That drill sergeant has no decency and is a lousy excuse for a serviceman." Well, you can only imagine my horror as that particular drill sergeant sat there grinning like an oversized gorilla on smack. I work at a pet store. This lady came in with her son who couldn't be older than 5 or so. She asked if I could help them with a ball python. When I took it out, she was really excited to hold it and immediately kept telling her son how they were going to convince his dad to let them get it. Her son was clearly afraid of the snake, and she kept trying to get him to hold it. He kept telling her he was afraid that it will bite him. She tried to tell him that snakes don't bite, and turned to me wanting me to tell him the same thing. I told the boy, "While snakes can bite, ours are quite friendly and won't want to bite you if you hold them gently." His mum was furious that I wouldn't tell this kid that snakes can't bite. I tried to tell her why I can't lie, but she said it was unacceptable, and now I've scared her son for life. I suggested he hold a bearded dragon, and he loved it. I think he left happier than she did. 2 college students were standing in the middle of a busy road this morning talking to each other. They were nearly hit by every car, but didn't let that stop their conversation. This happened to me last summer. Was driving down a busy street with a friend in the car when suddenly 2 teen girls scampered across the street in between cars and directly inches in front of my moving vehicle. I slammed on the brakes, my friend and I sat in shocked silence for about 15 seconds, and the girls just kept on going like they hadn't had a near-death experience. After 15 seconds had elapsed, both of us in the car just started screaming hysterically. One of the phrases I screamed after, "I almost frickin' killed a human!" was, "You almost made me kill you, and then you don't even frickin' look at me!" Seriously, my whole alternate life path where the guilt from killing 2 kids flashed before my eyes and I was so fricking teed off on behalf of alternate universe me. F those people. Watch where the frick you're walking. I think we've all had those moments in life where an errant twitch could have got us or someone else killed, and they keep us up at night. Although admittedly, I have too many to count now. The comments on any CNN article make me want to give up living on this planet. The Daily Mail website for the UK. The comments section is ridiculous. Will the rest of the world please stop linking to them on Reddit? I kinda think YouTube has to be the worst. I watched a Minute Physics episode and the comments were full of people arguing about religion and the scientific inaccuracies of the video. The thing is, the episode was on balancing pencils. People got offended and got in arguments because of pencil balancing. This just happened at a somewhat nearby school to me. The school's soccer team duct-taped a kid who was on the spectrum that wanted to play soccer to a football goalpost. They all left the field and he was found 15 minutes later. Seriously, what the frick is wrong with people? Time to end the soccer season permanently for that team. The San Francisco 49ers fan that nearly beat a guy to death in the bathroom because he allegedly tapped on his shoulder to tell him the stall in front of him was open. They don't deserve to ever see the light of day again. Yesterday, a lady cut in front of me at the grocery store. I said, "Excuse me, there's a line," and she replied, "I'm pregnant, you understand?" What? To clarify, she wasn't that far along. If you looked at her, you'd have wondered if she were pregnant or just chunky.
Then the two of you need to get to the back of the frickin' line.
I was recently on a megabus from DC to New York, and a family with several young children was trying to find the last untaken seats. There was clearly a seat open, but when they asked the girl, she was like,
"Sorry, I want to leave the seat open so I can sleep."
The family was like, no, that's not how it works. They had to get the bus driver and bring him to the back. The lady said the same thing to the bus driver, and the bus driver was like, no, that's not how this works. So the kid ended up sitting next to this girl. How did she think this was going to slide? Oh, I have a story. Last year I went to a Penguins-Flyers hockey game. If you aren't aware, it's one of the biggest rivalries in all of hockey. I'm a Penguins fan and the game was in Philadelphia. The game was going great and the Penguins took the lead and I was the only one cheering in my section. Some Flyers fans looked at me weird after that. Well, the game was over, Penguins win and I'm going to the bathroom. The guys who were sitting in my section followed me in and they each punched me after getting my attention. Some other fans saw and called the police on them. There were 3 of them. I had a bloody lip and bruised left cheek. Oh, and the best part? I was only 17. I was out for a motorcycle ride yesterday. I stopped at the spot off the main road to stretch my legs a bit. Noticed in the bushes that there were bags and bags of garbage all dumped in one spot. Not like a McDonald's bag that someone casually threw out of their window, more like someone loaded up what could possibly be months' worth of household garbage and dumped them in the woods. People like that? Frick them. Some comments here have inspired me. I babysat 2 boys, 3 and 5 years old, and a girl, 2 years old, for a single mother this summer. The mother has no job. The mother has no income. I babysit, but I don't actually know what it's accomplishing while she's out most of the time. She lives in her parents' house, but they work full-time jobs, and is also on WIC vouchers. The government pays for her to get food for the kids. She doesn't have a skill that she practices, nor does she maintain any semblance of physical fitness. Her children are kept in a room starting anywhere from 9 p.m. if they make her mad, to midnight, and they're not allowed to exit the room until the mother wakes in the morning. The catch? The mother uses Facebook or Netflix until 3, 4, or 5 a.m. each night. She sleeps until at least 11 a.m. every day unless the children have an appointment in the morning. I want to confirm that this is sometimes over 12 consecutive hours of confinement that occurs more often than not. They're allowed to use the bathroom as long as they return to the room when they're done. I don't know what to do, so I take the kids on walks. They are ecstatic just walking down the sidewalk for a few blocks and coming right back with no stops along the way. And I play games with them while I take care of them. Once I asked the 5-year-old if he'd like to eat breakfast with me at 10 a.m. He was just coming out of the bathroom. His response of, "I think I have to wait for everyone to wake up," indicates to me that he believes his confinement is normal. He went back into the room and I didn't see him for the next couple of hours. He eats dinner at the same time his grandparents eat, which is between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. almost every night. I'm so confused about this, I don't even know what's bothering me the most. Went hiking this weekend in Rocky Mountain National Park. A lot of things about people there annoy me. The list includes feeding wildlife cheese puffs, walking on the tundra that multiple signs clearly say to keep off, initials carved into aspen trees, and stopping their cars in the middle of the road on the peak of a mountain. That kind of thing makes me so angry. I once saw a guy offer an ostrich a lit cigar at the zoo after already feeding it chips, so the ostrich obviously thought that the cigarette was food too. I was so appalled that anyone could imagine that was acceptable behavior. I just don't understand how anyone could do anything like injure animals, damage nature, or litter. I saw someone post an article on Facebook about how Ebola was Obama's revenge against white people for slavery. And all of these people commenting, "Oh my god, it makes sense." A disease outbreak in Africa which is killing African people is a revenge against white people. And Obama made it happen. I think my brain is bleeding from the amount of stupid there. Obviously, a bunch of these stories are quite dated, but yeah, wow. I suspect that a lot of people with these theories went on to vote for the next guy in the White House. Last Saturday, I was walking along a vacant sidewalk when I was approached by a middle-aged couple. They were in jogging suits and walking considerably faster than I, so I moved to the grass to give them space. When they got closer, the woman started yelling at me that I wasn't far enough out of the way. I apologized, only to be intentionally clipped by the man following her and landing on my back. I got back up and laughed it off, only to hear the man yelling, "You're not the only one in this city, butthole." At that point, I was pretty amazed at how somebody can be that angry at someone they don't know. I hadn't said anything to them to start. Oh my god! Something similar happened to me once. I was walking down the sidewalk headed south and texting my sister,
glancing up every few seconds to see what I was headed for. I look up and two guys on bikes were riding straight toward me, so I step onto the grass so they can get by. As they ride past me, one of them yells that I need to watch where I'm going. What the frick? So I yelled back that they shouldn't be riding their frickin' bikes on the sidewalk. Almost 4 years later, and I remember exactly every detail of that moment. I'm still mad just thinking of it. So I live near a family that's just horrible. They locked their young son outside their house because he's annoying as frick and they're horrible parents. I'm walking outside and he's in their open garage. He has a bottle in his hands. I get closer. He's about to spray weed killer in his mouth. He does it before I rush in. I pound the door with the kid under my arm. The mum gives me a what the frick look and I scream about her kid eating poison. She rushes to the car and they drive off. I saw some guy trying to grab a duck at my local zoo. He's throwing it food and when it came near, he tried to grab it. This happened several times before I told him to stop. His friend immediately butts in and asks why I'm being such a butthole. Apparently me telling the guy he shouldn't grab the duck is the greater offense than actually trying to grab the duck. Fortunately, my wife pulled me away. Probably the best thing since I'd already stopped him from continuing his attempted duck molestation, and we were already close to a physical confrontation. Some buttholes broke into the zoo earlier this week and stole a flamingo. By the time someone found the flamingo, it was so severely injured that it had to be euthanized. I freaking hate people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got shoulder checked by a C-word in a suit, walking down with his two mates 3 abreast down the pavement. I was walking slowly down the inside, left-hand side of the pavement. We drive on the left in Australia, so I was following the road rules. Left lane is the slow lane. That was nasty, but why was I walking slowly? 8 months preggers. Bump like a beach ball. Mr. C-word in a suit didn't think I was far enough out of his way. I cried out when he hit me, and one of his mates turned around and got a shocked look on his face when he saw his scumbag friend has just shoulder-charged a preggers woman. But he didn't stop. Luckily, I was outside a little shop, and the Vietnamese lady running it came racing out just as I fell over crying. She gave me a cold water and had me sit down until I calmed down a bit. What a fricking tunt that bloke was. I just know karma's gonna bite him in the tush big time. No one that crappy gets far in life. Reading YouTube comments. I think there's a general rule not to read the comments on YouTube unless you want to feel like punching something. You should try Yahoo. You'll be mad and confused. Last week, a man in a car in front of me threw a full-sized Pringles can out of his window and almost hit my car. First of all, how lazy do you have to be to fricking litter? Second of all, why would you be eating a full-sized can of Pringles while driving? Once you pop. My husband eats a full-sized can of Pringles every time we drive somewhere more than an hour away. I try to get him to eat the snack size, but no dice. 'Cause he's a real man. Well, not if his hand fits inside a Pringles can. I had that moment when I learned how people actually spend thousands of dollars and get all territorial in Second Life. Apparently, some people take this crap seriously. Wait. Second Life is still on? You should see the crap that happens in EVE Online. People have gone as far as physically cutting opponents' power lines and sending working girls to high-ranking fleet members as a bribe. This isn't recent, but this is what happened when I first experienced how society is. I was 10 or 11 years old and I'd just come home from playing soccer with a kid from our neighborhood. Before I can walk inside the door, my grandma stopped me and told me that I have to take a shower and do a small puja before walking in because the kid I was playing with was son of the family who makes a living by cleaning houses. My grandma was treating them as untouchables. Made me realize how illogical she is. A couple of months ago when I stopped 2 guys, one in their early 20s, the other closer to 50, dragging an 18-year-old girl into a taxi while she tried to pull away from them. When I confronted them, I was beaten pretty hard and then pushed in front of a car. No broken bones, but it was doing about 25 miles per hour and the road rash sucked. But it drew enough of a crowd that she got away. Screw those 2 guys and the taxi driver that seemed to think it was acceptable. I still have nerve damage in my left hand from that fricking car. Also, the girl is fine. I still talk to her. She recovered well. No, she is not my girlfriend. I already had and continue to have one. They're good friends as well, though. A woman changed her baby on the table of the busy restaurant I work in. Seriously, what the frick? People eating their lunch don't want to see your poopy naked child.
I've had to get managers to explain to customers that changing a dirty diaper in the middle of a restaurant is unsanitary way more times than I should have to. I'm so glad that I no longer wait at tables.
Please tell me that someone actually threw her out.
We didn't need to, she actually paid up and left pretty soon afterwards. She seemed genuinely surprised at the amount of people staring in disgust that I think it made her uncomfortable. Good. Look, being a new parent is hard and I'm all for people being able to feed their babies in any given public setting, but yeah, maybe keep the fecal matter away from food. I think this lady maybe just needed a reminder rather than the vitriol and exile that some of the commenters seem to think she deserves. Every time I see a driver signal to change lanes and the guy 5 car lengths behind him speeds way the frick up to stop him from moving over. If you're reading this and you do that, F you. Every time I drive a car. I clicked on a link to a GIF of a man cutting the tip of his eggplant off. Went to the local market and noticed this dog, a miniature Doberman, waiting by the door when I went in. I finished in the market. On my way out, I noticed it was following people around, very submissive and timid-like, with its tail between its legs. Then the people just motioned or kicked him away. He just sat in the middle of the parking lot, looking very confused. Another person was putting their groceries in the car next to me, saw the dog and said, "I've seen that dog wandering the neighborhood. It's sad. I think it was abandoned." Just as she said that, here comes the local idiot in a pickup truck, sees the dog in the middle of the road, steps on the gas and hits it. It happened so quick. After the pickup hit Charlie, he just sat there confused. I called to him. He came to me with his tail between his legs, slight limp. His paw was ground raw. I took him to the vet, no chip, no collar, under a year old. Rescued him. This literally happened to me less than an hour ago. I was at Walmart with a friend and he needed to buy some ham. It was a supercenter. Yes, I know buying produce meat at Walmart was my first mistake, but it's the closest convenience store. We go up to the counter and the lady is obviously too busy putting rotisserie chickens in plastic containers to acknowledge us. So I say, "Excuse me," not rudely, just to get her attention. She looks up like I just called her a thunder C-word or something and comes over all irritated. I say, "Can we get a pound of honey-cured ham, please?" Yes, I said please. I'm not recreating this to make me sound like a better person. She's clearly distressed by the whole ordeal, having to open the display, grab out the ham, stuff that is physically taxing. Then she says, "Do you want that cut 1 or 2? I've never been asked that before, so I thought she asked if I wanted 1 pound or 2. So I replied, "Just 1 pound's fine." "No, do you want it cut 1 or 2? She literally yelled the question at me. Took me a second to realize that meant the thickness of the slices of ham, but I had no idea which one was thinner. I'm still trying to be nice, but I'm slowly losing it. I just ask, "Which one's thinner?" She doesn't even reply, she just goes back and starts talking crap about me to her other co-worker, who seemed nice, but probably heard the bullcrap version of the story. The lady comes back with the ham, slams it on the scale, puts it in the bag and sends me on my way. The thing that made me think I don't want to live on this planet anymore wasn't the frustration or the yelling at me, it was the fact that she expected me to know what 1 and 2 meant for the fricking slicing machine. I mean seriously, who the frick expects people to know the exact specifications of their sliced meat? I was driving down a road and this guy was coming towards me on the right-hand side at an upcoming intersection. The road he was coming from was a small road leading from a store. I was on the major road, he had a stop sign. I didn't. He blows through the stop sign, turning right in front of me without even so much as looking either direction to see if the road was clear. Or signaling, but I guess that's to be assumed at this point. I had to slam on my brakes and would have hit him, but I laid on the horn, he saw me, put his foot on the gas, and the collision was very narrowly avoided. If you're gonna blow a stop sign, at least look to see if other vehicles are coming. My 14-year-old daughter, who lives most of the time with her mother, my ex, and stepfather, recently invited me to go to an anime and Japanese culture convention with her. Even wanted me to wear my ninja gear for some cosplay. She was super excited about it, and since it's happening on a weekend when she's with me, I said, "Heck yeah, I'll go with you." Unfortunately, I have to involve the ex and stepfather in the process. As soon as I start trying to plan the logistics with them, I get a call from my daughter using my ex's phone and she tells me now that she doesn't really want me to come after all. I strongly suspect she's got in trouble for inviting me and her mum forced her to do that second part. I truly hate that woman. I was doing work at Starbucks, minding my own business. Despite the fact that I have headphones in and I'm ignoring him, this guy takes a seat across from me at this 2-person table. He starts hitting on me and yelling so I can hear him over my music. My sweater is opened, and as I shift to look away from him, the port in my chest, at the time I was on chemo, becomes visible. He sees it and starts telling me that I'm a hideous monster, I shouldn't be allowed in public, and calls the attention of the barista, asking him to kick me out for his personal safety. Yeah. Recently brought a few chickens. The second day they were here, the usual neighbor kids came over to play. I sat down and feed the baby, and about 10 minutes in I have to get up because I hear kids screaming and chickens losing it. I walk back out to a dozen children I don't know, 4 of which have busted my hen run and are in with the chickens. One kid has a hen by her wing. She flaps, he lets go, and then he kicks her. Needless to say, I was upset. Without leaving my porch, I said, "Get out, all of you! I don't know what makes you think it's appropriate to hit someone else's animal. I don't know what would make you think it's okay to do that to any animal in general, but it is in no uncertain terms not okay. I don't know who you are, but get the frick off my property." I tell my kids and the neighbors' kids they play with that no one's allowed in the backyard. I go back inside to feed the baby. I'm not even sat down yet and I hear the fridge door open. I say, "Toddler's name, no snacks right now." Guess what? Not my toddler. Some neighbor kid I don't know just walked in and opened my fridge. Now, he wasn't the crap that kicked my chicken, but he was in the run. I kicked the kid out. As I open the door to escort the fridge raider from my home, the chicken kicker shows up with his mummy. "You B-word, you think you're so much better than my son? How dare you tell him what to do? I'm gonna call the cops on your butt." I tell her, calmly, that I probably shouldn't have sworn at her son, but he can't just go around kicking animals. She leaves to call the cops anyway. Comes back 15 minutes later, says she wants to settle this like adults and will consider $100 to cover the mental anguish from my yelling at her son. I tell her to just call the cops and have them deal with it. I get called a B-word again and she leaves. In short, kid kicks my chicken, I tell him to leave, his mum wants $100 for mental anguish from me yelling at him. Parents, what's the most messed up thing you've caught your kid doing? My wife was driving our then 3-year-old back from her aunt's house to eat lunch. She noticed him cram something in his mouth and start chewing, and she asked him what he was eating. No response. Thinking he might be choking or something, she brakes hard, pulls over to the side of the road, yanks the back door open and grabs a French fry out of his mouth. Now, they'd been to McDonald's several days before and the car had been cleaned since then, so she looks high and low to see where it came from. She gets suspicious and takes the cover off his car seat. Lo and behold, there's about a dozen stale French fries in the folds of the plastic car seat. Far too many to be accounted for by random drops. The kid was stashing them for later, like a squirrel. This is tame by comparison to some of the other stories here, but here it is. When my son was about a year old, I found him stuffing his pants pockets full of Vaseline, scooping it out with his hands. Really makes me wonder why little kids' clothes even have pockets. I was dressing my 4-month-old son the other day. His trousers had pockets on them. Like, what the heck does a 4-month-old need pockets for? My 4-year-old daughter used to stash steak knives in strategic locations around the house. My neighbor busted her doing it. I didn't believe him until he pulled out a 6-inch carving knife from behind a bookcase. With the right mentor, your daughter will grow up to be an amazing badass. My friend who worked in a residential treatment facility once found a kid who'd stuck a paperclip into an electrical outlet and was lying on the floor looking at it. When asked what he was doing, the kid replied, "Every time I touch this with my tongue, I wet my pants." I read that in Ralph Wiggum's voice from The Simpsons. My daughter cramped in a box and gave it to my son as a present in front of our whole family. I guess no one really caught her as she was obviously and openly trolling. Pretty messed up, I didn't even know what to say to that. I caught my son, 7, and his best friend, 9, drawing clown faces on each other's butt cheeks and with the plans of tooting in each other's faces. I mean, yeah, it's gross, but it's also objectively hilarious and weirdly cute, not that I can put my finger on why. One of the less messed up things in this grouping by far. A few weeks ago, my 4-year-old said she had to pee. She was in the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes when we start hearing her gag, so I tell her dad to go and check on her. He walks in and she quickly throws a huge log back in the toilet and tries to hide her doo-doo-covered hands. When he asked her why she was playing with her caca, she said she wanted to see how squishy it was. Ugh. I did this once when I was a kid. It stuck to my hands, obviously. I was not pleased and never did it again. Friend's daughter once said pretty loudly in a bus, "Look, Daddy, Uncle's beard looks like Mom's pee-pee." I lived in a condo when I was a kid. The family living above us had a girl my age, who I played with in a small forest bordering our backyard from time to time. She used to pick up these big black slugs from the ground and lick the thick black slime off of them, like completely savoring every drop. She thought it was yummy and would easily do a dozen slugs in one sitting. Her parents discovered it, and needless to say, we were not allowed to play in the forest anymore. Walking in on my son flirting on Omegle. He was 7 at that time. The youngest one, age 5 at the time, stuck multiple quarters in the skin of his pee-pee and showed my best friend his change dispenser impersonation. It was hilarious and deeply weird. My son went through a phase where he would wake up from his nap, unbeknownst to us, take off his diaper and smear his doo-doo all over his room. It'd be on his bed, the walls, the windows, his toys. Worst of all, there would be places where it looked like he'd rubbed it into the carpet with all his might. I wish I could say this only happened once. We also caught him tasting and eating his own boom boom more than once. My son did that for a year. Every day after his nap, I would take a deep breath, say a prayer that maybe this day my nightmare would be over, and walk into his room to see him covered in brown, with smears all over his crib, the walls, and himself. I tried putting footy PJs on him and safety pinning the zipper up, safety pinning the pants and a shirt together on him, cutting the feet off those PJs and putting them on backwards. I seriously thought about duct taping that damn diaper on him. Eventually he grew out of it, but I nearly lost my mind. I'm just so glad that I'm not alone. Anyone I talk to seems to think that no toddlers ever do this. I have twins, and one is the great poopy Picasso, and the other one is unfortunately getting crap thrown at him like it's a monkey war zone. A few days ago I came in because I heard them playing instead of napping. Scat everywhere. I got them in the shower, got all the sheets and pillows in the wash, scrubbed everything, added new sheets, got the kids back in the crib. Picasso has taken off his diaper and done it again. He has no sheets right now. Just why? I was babysitting my friend's children, probably aged around 5 and 7 back then, and I caught the daughter, the 5-year-old, following her brother into the bathroom when he wanted to pee. The kids then informed me that she does it all the time because she likes to run her fingers in the stream of pee and then lick them because it's yummy. My daughter is not even 3, but she put a box of nerds down her diaper and stated that she was a rattle toy. Uncle to a rambunctious boy. When he was around 2, we found him laying around with a dog, English bulldog. Neither seemed like anything was wrong except for the dog jingling. My nephew had stuck my brother's car keys up the dog's butt, like all the way to the plastic knob. The dog seemed unfazed, and my nephew seemed proud that he had found the keyhole to start the dog. My friend used all the olive oil to tickle his pickle with. His parents never caught him, but his mum figured it out and told him to use lotion because it was cheaper. Something extra virgin. I have an 8-year-old son who has sleepovers with the kid down the block. I came downstairs and one had his head under the other's blanket. After the typical, "What the frick are you guys doing?" I found out they have a game where they smell one another's toots. I thought it was weird, then I remembered the same scene from Biodome. Not my kids, but babysitting my twin cousins recently. They're 5. They were arguing about something during a snack, and the boy twin suddenly got eerily calm. He goes into her bedroom, gets the terrarium for her anoles, the lizards you find in your gardens, and takes it outside. She starts screaming bloody murder. I'm completely confused. He turns to her through the glass door and proceeds to smash the tank against the ground. Just windmills his arms and wails the tiny box against the cement. No fluctuation in his emotion. I ran out to stop him, but the 5 or so little lizards in the tank were dead. I looked back at the other twin and she was sobbing into her hands. He just walked past her and sits down to continue eating his snack. My aunt told me that was the 3rd time he's done that. Your aunt should frickin' do something about his behavior. This kind of emotional stuff is going to destroy the other twin. Agreed. And 1, he's harming animals, and 2, this isn't ripping up a drawing, this is a seriously violent act. Me and my 5-year-old son at the urinals. He's arguing that his pee-pee is bigger. It was at a hockey arena, so there were about 40 dudes laughing their butts off. Were they laughing because his was bigger? You were there, weren't you? My daughter, when 15 and heavily in piercings and death metal, decided to brand herself with a star shape on her arm. I didn't realize till the next day, still no idea how she managed the shape or not to scream. She still has the scars. Cripes, I did some pretty stupid stuff to try and change up my look when I was a kid, but never quite got around to branding myself with a presumably homemade, star-shaped red poker. I'm sweating just thinking about it. My youngest of 3 had just started walking. One day I found her hanging onto the bathroom toilet. I walked in and to my surprise, saw her with a handful of soggy toilet paper. Right as I scream her name, that little baby's hand reaches up into her mouth and she begins chewing it. One of my older kids forgot to flush and I panicked, having never experienced this with her bro or sis. I called poison control. They assured me that children ingest fecal matter often and she may have a stomachache but will be fine. Another time, same kid mind you, we're walking into a grocery store. I look down and say, her name, "Where did you get that gum you're chewing?" Her reply was, "On the ground." Ugh, she's by far my most disgusting child. My kids were pretty tame. I had one son scotch tape himself to the floor. I think he liked the sound of the tape coming off. Same son also built scotch tape footbridges between the countertops. My daughter snuck out one night and a friend who works nights saw her and called us. We were waiting on her bed when she climbed back in the window. God, that was a great parenting moment. My dad caught my sister sneaking back into the house with a ladder. "Why don't you just take the stairs?" was the only question he asked her. Those are the worst, when you know you're in deep crap but the parents don't sound mad. The uncertainty of your fate drives you crazy. Not a parent, but I've caught my younger brother, aged 3 to 5 at the time, on a stepping stool peeing into the air conditioning unit. I didn't so much catch him at it, it was more like he was doing it at me. He's 4 years old and we were having a bedtime battle where he simply wouldn't be quiet or stay in bed. He can really dig in his heels sometimes. I was getting really angry for the 4th or 5th time that night and I walked up to his doorway to tell him he needed to be quiet. He was ready for me with his pants off, his ankles up to his ears, and his butthole pointed directly at the doorway. He heard me when I stopped dead in my tracks and he looked between his legs at me with pure hate in his eyes. I gently told him to pipe down and went back to my room. I come back one more time for the same reason, and this time he was in the same position except he was sticking his finger in his butt. At me. Hatefully. He just sat there wordlessly mean-mugging me with his finger in his butt. That was probably the most messed up crap I've caught my kid doing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to have a roommate that would help me with watching my daughter, even during times where I just needed a nap. One day I was napping and my roommate was watching my daughter, but my daughter headed back to her room. She didn't come out for a while, so my roommate went looking for her. She found my daughter in my room, standing over me with a toy knife, bringing it down over and over, whispering, "Stab, stab, stab, stab." My son was 5 and had started playing Skyrim on the Xbox 360. One afternoon, the neighbor called and asked if I could watch her son, also 5, for a few hours. They played with swords, shields, Nerf guns, typical boy games. At one point I stopped hearing them. That's always a dangerous thing with any child. You know something is going down. I opened the door very quietly and saw them on the floor. My son was now wearing his friend's shirt and pants, and the other boy was down to only his underwear. My first thought was, what the frick? But my son looked up at me with a sword in his hand and said, "We're playing Skyrim, and I just killed him, so I'm taking his stuff." All I could say was, "Okay, but let's try and keep all of our clothes on from now on." Well, from about the age of 2 to 5, I had a flock of imaginary ducks that used to follow me around. Apparently, we had to wait a good minute or so each day when getting into the car so all of my duck friends could come along. When asked about them, I would say that I am their king and they are here to follow me. But apparently it started getting weird when I'd pretend to break up fights between the ducks and cry when one died. Yep, I was a bit messed up. My brother hated bugs. We had cacti in our front yard. He would cut their heads off and skewer them all over the cacti, or he would take their heads and put their wings in their body where their heads would be. Vlad the Exterminator. Sent the boys to bed with popcorn for a fun treat. I heard maniacal laughter shortly thereafter. Go upstairs to find one of them sticking popcorn betwixt his cheeks and farting so it came out. Asked what was going on and both boys in a panic tried to eat the evidence as mother and I watched horrified. Walked into the bathroom to find my son trying to put a piece of duty back up his butt because he thought his heart fell out. Not my kid, but my friend went back to pick up his little brother from his friend's house and no parents were home, so he walked up and found his brother and his friend holding each other's wee-wees. My friend is a 3rd grade teacher. He came to school one morning after having been out sick for a day and found that his classroom only had girls. Turns out all the boys had been suspended the day before for teabagging each other during recess. Walked in on my kid torturing an action figure with a lighter. "Where are your rebel friends now? Ha 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 ha." That's not that uncommon, I guess. My friends and I did weird crap like that when we were kids. Like one time, we made a parachute for an action figure out of a shopping bag and some string, and then we taped a firecracker to his butt, lit it, and threw him on the floor of a 4-story building. Just because. Kids are strange. Reading this, I'm thinking kids are dangerous psychopaths who shouldn't be allowed alone with pets. Apparently, when I was little, I ran off in the buff towards the local golf course. I was also caught making my butthole breathe in front of the mirror. Oh, and I picked up my little sister by the head. I mean, the streaking at the golf course is just hilarious and kind of normal for kids, I think. The other two, a little weird but still not out of the ordinary. I have to assume the sister was okay for the author to post this. This is less messed up than just funny, but my cousin entered the bathroom to find her 2-year-old boy had covered himself in mummy's stickers. They weren't stickers, they were Kotex pads. And yes, there are photos. I finally remember a birthday party at my then-girlfriend's family when her 5-year-old cousin came down the stairs from the bathroom, happy as a clam and announcing to the world, "Mommy, I stuffed cotton balls into my butt just as you always do." Mommy was not happy with her son. I'm getting a vasectomy. I caught my daughter putting Tic Tacs in her butt because she wanted her next number 2 to smell good. My mum caught my little brother descaling their brand new goldfish at the kitchen table. It was disturbing from what I hear. Son here. You know those furious whack-offs you sometimes do purely to get your fun stick to settle down? Well, yeah, I'd been cooking cookies, listening to music. Nobody was home, so I thought, 1 minute till the cookies are done. I can do this. And I basically lay on the floor and furiously spanked the mule with all my might. Finished. Opened my eyes and behold my mum, arms full of shopping, in the doorway. We didn't speak for a while and I avoided eyesight. When I discovered you could download adult flicks on Kazaa, I skipped school. Turns out my sister skipped her last class and came home early. She walked in on me. Months later, I stupidly entered her room without knocking and I caught her in the act. She yelled out, "Now we're even!" I guess she was right, but I still feel that was a weird thing to say. I've been told on numerous occasions about how when I was 3 or 4, as my parents and I were walking out of the old spaghetti factory, I turned to a table that had a black family in it, with a little black boy about my age, and I excitedly exclaimed, "Look, it's a basketball baby!" My parents told this story of when I was about 3 or 4. My sister was playing in her room one day and apparently came across a spider in her toy chest. Being a 5 to 6-year-old, she lost her mind and started screaming. That's when I supposedly learned what my life's calling was. As the story goes, I come barging into my sister's room and yell, "Don't worry, I'll hypnotize it with my wee-wee," and promptly dropped my pants. My dad laughed, my mother cried, and I defeated the spider. Not a parent, but my friend's little brother, who was 5 or 6 at the time, would strip down and chase me through the house with a kitchen knife. I was terrified of hanging out with my friend because of this. So after it happened 2 or 3 times, and one time his older brothers attacked me while wearing the Scream costume, I decided I wasn't going to his house anymore. My 3-year-old son asked this random woman in a store if she was scared in the fire. He said, "I saw you burning, but I couldn't help you." The woman turned as white as a sheet and explained to me that she had been in a terrible house fire when she was little, 50 years ago. It burned her hands and legs very badly. I was very creeped out at the time. I'm still not sure what the frick happened there. I don't know if it's messed up, but it messed me up a bit. Not a parent, but an older brother. When my younger sister's twins were about 2 or 3 years old, they filled the bathtub up with hot water, using only the red side of the 2 knobs, and took off their diapers and threw them in the tub. I heard from my mum that they inflated to huge dimensions. Oh, and the time one of them put an entire roll of toilet paper in the toilet, effectively clogging it. My sisters do weird crap together. My 3-year-old son figured out how to take selfies with an old iPad we had. Wife thought I'd be teed off. The pictures were hysterical, but not safe to show others. I wiped that iPad pretty fast, as it would be tough to explain the pics to people. Funny because he was all calm in the pictures. Batman undies, just one leg in, halfway up his leg as he posed for the camera. It was as though he knew exactly how he wanted to look in them. Not bad by any stretch, but my almost 2-year-old daughter has a sheep comfort toy that she loves. Can't go to sleep without him. Whenever she's upset, she just calls for him. Came home to the sheep's disemboweled husk. Apparently he had a small tear, and she went to town on him. I hate to think what she'd do to someone she hates after seeing what she did to her best friend. Happy ending though, I managed to stitch him up good as new. I used to enjoy tickling my pickle in the shower with a rubber on, and once I left the used rubber behind and my mum found it. Awkward conversation after when I had to explain that I didn't even have a girl over. When I was a kid, like 5, I went through a phase where I'd convinced myself I was the only real person in the world and that my parents, teachers, and friends were all just constructs in my own world that I created. I remember saying stuff to my mum and teacher along the lines of, "You can't do anything to me that I don't want you to do. I made you." I remember thinking at the time that it was strange that I would choose to have one of my constructs punish me. I decided that I was doing it because life would get boring if it was too easy. I eventually got over all this. I caught my 1-year-old with something in her mouth. By the time I said to her, "What do you have?" she'd crunched on it a few times and then spit it out. I went over to investigate and was horrified to see that she'd spit out a lizard head. A fricking lizard head in her mouth. Ugh. I guess the cats brought it in and ate the rest of it. She just happened to find the head before I saw. Nasty. Not a parent, but when I was helping my 9 years younger sister clean her room, I found a pouch where she was storing dead flies. Not my kids, but me. I dumped all of my mum's medicine in the car vents. When my mum saw me with empty medicine bottles, she freaked out and took me to the hospital, assuming I ate them all. My brother shot me with a bow. He also tried to stab me several times, succeeding in many of them. To be fair, I did tie him to cinder blocks and throw him in the pool, also hanged him upside down from a tree, buried him alive in a plywood coffin for a bit. He smacked my legs with a baseball bat for that one. Good times, good times. Are you and your brother Wednesday and Pugsley Adams by any chance? My grandma tells me a story about how my uncle threw himself down the stairs in the morning so he wouldn't have to go to school. Grandma took him to the hospital, got a cast on his arm, fed him, and then dropped him off at school. What was your craziest, "I thought about it and it happened" story? When I was 17, a friend and I were driving around town in his 80-something Toyota Tercel. This car was a total piece of crap and had had a seriously loud knock in the engine for weeks. We had been out tooling around for maybe an hour and the knocking noise was getting to me. We're sitting at a red light in the center of a 3-lane road about 20 minutes from home when I exclaimed, "Wouldn't it be some crap if this piece of crap car just went bang and blew the hell up?" As the light turns green, my friend chuckled and said something like, "Yeah, that would suck." The car in front of us starts to move and my buddy pushes the gas and bang! That piece of crap threw a piston and died right in the middle of the road. He looked at me like, "What the frick did you do that for?" And we both laughed our butts off for a few seconds. We pushed his car into a nearby church parking lot with the help of a few onlookers and took the plates off and left it there. That was over a decade ago, and as far as I know, he never heard another thing about it. No idea what eventually became of that car. I worked at a Starbucks in a Lucky grocery store. We had a guy that would come in 4 to 5 times a week and get a small coffee. We'd give it to him for the refill price, and he'd sit in the store for hours. He was homeless and smelled pretty bad and was pretty scruffy looking with long hair and a beard, but he seemed nice enough. After like a year of this, the store manager came to me and told me that if I saw Nathan, the homeless guy, to call the store manager because he wanted to talk to him. That night I had a dream that I was at work and Nathan was there as well, but as an employee. Nothing super eventful about the dream until I went to work the next day and saw we had a new employee. He was sitting at the table in front of the Starbucks kiosk and one of my coworkers was talking to him. I didn't really pay much attention until my coworker called me over and said, "Doesn't he look completely different without his beard?" Mind blown. Apparently, my store manager figured out that if he was going to be chilling in the store all day, he might as well give him a job. He bought him some clothes, got him a haircut and a shave, a gym membership for showers, and started helping him look for a place to stay. I never really had a positive or negative opinion on the store manager before that point, but mad respect for that. 5 years later, Nathan still works there. He outlasted me. A few years ago, I was going to the grocery store with my dad and I asked him, "Is there any part of the body that can't get cancer?" "I don't know, we'll have to look it up later." Later, getting back into the car, we turn on the radio. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for our trivia fact of the week. The lens of the eye is the only body part that cannot get cancer. I really thought that story was going to end with one of you getting cancer of the right buttock or something. Me too, commenter. I was honestly kind of dreading whatever the outcome here was, but this is much better. I would never believe this story had happened if I wasn't present for it. When I was in high school, me and a buddy were driving back from Long Beach with his mum. About halfway home, this butthole starts riding his mum's rear bumper. She gets really nervous and tries to get out of his way by changing lanes, The jerk guns it and changes lanes around her, scaring the crap out of us and nearly forcing her into the center divider. Well, he gets in front of us and slows the frick down to like 1 mile per hour higher than we're going, and my friend's mum is almost in tears and is just screaming, "What the frick, butthole?" So my buddy goes, "Don't worry about it, Mum. We'll all laugh our butts off when he blows his tire and wrecks his car right now." The words had barely left his mouth when, boom! His left front tire completely blows and he tanks his crappy Nissan right into the K-rail. We had to swerve to avoid hitting him. Needless to say, it was an eerie ride home. Watching Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy subject was science. During the commercial break, I said, "I bet it's tungsten." The answer was tungsten. I had this at a pub quiz once. The quizmaster explained that in the next round, each question would be a line from a song, and the answer was the next line of the song. Before a single line was read out, I wrote, "Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality," in the answer space for question 1. I was right. I had a recurring dream when I was a little kid. I would be sitting on my dad's shoulders and would be walking down this really narrow hallway. For some reason, I had this inherent knowledge that there were monsters in it, but my dad kept them away. The dream always ended before we got out. When I was 5, I had the same dream, except we got to the end of the hallway, and my dad just suddenly disappeared. I looked for him for a while, but to no avail. I woke up and found out he had died while I was sleeping. When I was 11, my grandpa had been sick for a while, and he was in the hospital. One weekend, I was at a friend's place about an hour and a half from home. Everything was fine, but I suddenly just knew something wasn't right. I called my mom, and she assured me that everything was fine, and my grandpa was stable. I still convinced my friend's mom to drive me home right away though, and I made her drive me to my grandparents instead of home. Sure enough, when I got there, my whole family was there, and my grandpa had just passed away. I found out afterwards that when I'd called my mom, it had just happened about 5 minutes before, but she didn't want to break the news to me over the phone. When I was in 1st grade, we were playing a Jeopardy-style game with actual buzzers. The rules of the game were that if you buzz in too early, you have to answer the question anyway and don't get another chance at it. Well, a question had just finished and it was that transition period between questions. As soon as the teacher was about to say the first word of the next question, I hit my buzzer unknowingly. My teacher stopped herself from reading the question and looked at me for an answer. I said, "Triangle." I was right. I was about 6 years old and playing with my brand new pet bunny rabbits that my dad bought for me after church. I turned to him and said, "Daddy, I'm glad that you and Mummy are still married. So many of my friends' parents are divorced." My dad responds, "Actually, there's something we need to talk about." And that's how I learned my parents were getting divorced. I fell in love with a girl freshman year of college and we were together until the end of sophomore year. We reached a breaking point because she came from a very traditional Indian family, and she was very in favor of being married young. I loved her like crazy, but at the same time I knew I wasn't ready for all that she was hoping for, and I didn't think it was fair to keep getting her hopes up that way. I was 20 years old and I'd never had a job for God's sakes. It was a brutal breakup because as much as I tried to explain myself, any girl will take that as a rejection, as saying somehow that she wasn't good enough. We were both pretty heartbroken, but we realized eventually that trying to be friends would only make things harder, so we agreed to not talk anymore. One of the last things I said that it wasn't impossible for it to work out someday, but we both needed to try and live on our own for a while and give a chance for being with other people. We were both kind of over-dependent on each other and we both needed to mature and learn to be our own person. We lost touch for 2 years, saw each other very rarely and spoke not at all. We dated other people. At the end of senior year, I'd just gotten out of a really bad relationship where I'd been cheated on. It wasn't that bad because I wasn't really in love with the girl, but it still felt crappy. The week before exams, I had a dream about the old girl where we ran into each other at this little coffee shop we always used to go to and read and hang out in. In the dream, all we did was talk and hold hands a little. The next day, I picked up the books I needed to study and went to that coffee shop. 15 minutes later, she walked in and sat down without seeing me. She was studying too. I walked up to the counter and brought another drink and looked over just to be sure it was her. I couldn't believe it. She saw me and of course at that point it was impossible not to say hello. We talked for 2 hours. She had had some bad relationships too. We found out we had gotten jobs in the same city. We didn't hold hands because that would have been bizarre, but we could both feel it. Dated, married, been together 5 years. I don't believe in God, but I still can't believe how perfectly things worked out. A lot of these are about speaking disasters or tragedies into existence, or coincidences of those nature, so it's nice to get another cute one in. When I was 14 or 15, I was sitting with this girl I'd just started hanging out with. We're waiting for our ride home and she talks about missing her brother, and I said something about him showing up for Christmas, not realizing he was very estranged, 3 years, from the family. Awkward moments ensue, we get rides home, no big deal. Flash forward to 7 a.m. Christmas morning, she calls me freaking out because he showed up at the family door. The first laptop I ordered arrived a day early when I was out of the house, so I came home to find the little slip on my door saying they'd try again tomorrow. The next day I woke up only to find that I'd slept in and missed the shipment again. I was pretty annoyed but just set my alarm for the next day. For some reason I missed the FedEx guy for the third day in a row and I'm just fuming. I decide to go for a run to vent my anger, and while running I think to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if I saw the FedEx truck and got my laptop? After half an hour I turn the corner of an intersection and see the FedEx truck and the FedEx guy walking towards it. I excitedly dash up to him and explain my situation to him while gasping for air. He remembers the package, finds it, and then hands it to me after I sign for it. Such a good day. Sitting in class, Professor pulls up Windows Media Player to play us a video on improper call signaling. He pauses with the mouse hovering over Resume Previous Playlist button, and I think, oh crap, what if it's adult flicks? That'd be hilarious. Turns out it was more than just that. It was some intense butt action with a ridiculously huge marital aid. I laughed very hard. My friend showed me a picture of his new girlfriend. I told him, damn, Ronald, once she realizes she's too hot for you, it's over, man. She broke up with him the next day. He has looked at me accusingly ever since. Sitting at lunch with some change, I asked my friend, how many times on average do you think I'd have to toss these coins for them to all land on heads? I had about 7 or 8 coins. He starts getting into the math required and thinking out loud about it. I comment, I bet it's just 1, and I tossed the coins. They all end up heads. Yeah, I was right. It was only 1. During post-party night walking, I told a friend who was walking on the empty road, "You're going to die." For the first time in his life, he listened to me, did a step to his left, and got back to safety. 2 seconds later, a car traveling at more than 130 kilometers per hour came out from nowhere and plowed through the space he had been standing in 2 seconds prior. Final Destination 6. I mean, he's still gonna die now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was about 8. My teacher had asked me to deliver an envelope of some sort to the principal's office in the middle of the school day. My school had at its center a single long hall, with my classroom near one end and the principal's office at the other. As a child, the hall seemed absurdly long, like a mile. Class was in session, so I was walking down this hall all alone, my footsteps echoing, quite surreal. It suddenly occurred to me that I was walking quite close to one wall, and that if a teacher were to fling open their doors, I'd be knocked silly. Just then, a teacher flung open her door, knocking me silly. These were big, old, heavy doors, and the energy transfer to my head was significant. In my memory, both my feet left the ground, though this seems unlikely in retrospect. I landed on my butt and was momentarily stunned. Our eyes locked, the teacher's and mine, for an instant, then I burst out laughing uncontrollably. The synchronicity struck me as hilarious. Even the pain of being cold-cocked by a massive school door couldn't suppress my hilarity. I believe my reaction led the teacher to believe I'd suffered brain damage. It took quite some time to convince the various concerned school officials that I was unharmed, if silly. I was talking with a group of friends outside of an Expendables show in Santa Cruz. We were smoking cigs and making jokes when one of my buddies gets our attention and says, "Watch this, I'm gonna pull this girl's shirt down with my mind." He made a funny concentrating face and we all laughed and looked at the girl about 15 feet away from us on the porch. She was mid-conversation with what looked like a good friend, who was male, and slowly but surely her loose top slid over. With each hand motion or exclamation, her top inched over slightly. After about a minute and a half, her right fun chest bit was fully exposed. We cheered and laughed and couldn't believe it. The guy who was talking to her noticed but was too embarrassed to say anything. She finally put it away when some chick from a nearby table made a comment about it so loud that she took notice. But she was standing there with one of her tots out for a good few minutes. By the end of it, everyone on the porch was looking at it. She was a really hot girl with a great mid-sized rack, so I guess that happens a lot. People staring. I kind of felt bad because she got really embarrassed, but wow, it was funny. In college, I was watching Eurotrip with my buddy. The Pope had been sick, and during the part where they make Vatican City think the Pope is dead, I turned to my friend and said, "Man, wouldn't it be weird if the Pope died while we were watching this?" His time of death was almost exactly then. I found out the next day. In short, I killed Pope John Paul II.
Wait until the Catholics hear about this one. You're in for it, Buster.
Every time I say, "I thought, insert celebrity name here, was dead," they die 3 days later. Unfortunately, I have to actually believe they were dead. I've said I thought Tom Cruise was dead about 7 times and nothing has happened. I'm really sorry about Johnny Cash, though. Quickly, someone convince this person that James Corden is dead. Stat! Oh, I'm kidding. Mostly. Not really pre-thought or said, but it was the craziest thing ever. My friend and I were at Fridays, and he was being super rambunctious and obnoxious while eating his salad. For some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to poke a tomato with his fork and then fling it at me as hard as he could. Drawing his fork up past his shoulder, my friend seriously whipped his tomato across the table with all his might. My first reaction was to sort of turn my head, anticipating the thwack sound the wet vegetable would make as it hit me. But that sound never came, there was no sudden thud, and no tomato hit me. I sat there, fork in hand, wondering what the frick happened. Somehow, that giant hunk of tomato had zoomed across the table and stuck itself onto my fork in the exact same way it was on his. Had we been professional lacrosse players planning the perfect pass, we could never have executed it as flawlessly as had happened. It was the most beautiful demonstration of Newtonian physics my then 17-year-old self had ever experienced. And yes, a tomato is a fruit, I made an error. But guess what? I'm not changing the story. Went to college and worked at a grocery store in Bellingham, Washington State. My co-workers and I were talking in the break room before a shift and the subject of celebrities came up. We talked about how celebrities might be a-holes because they had to deal with sycophants constantly bothering them. Then someone brought up Ryan Stiles, who lives near Bellingham and is owner of the Upfront Theatre, and how he would never shop at the store by the college campus, probably because he doesn't want to be hassled by college noobs. After our conversation, we left to go to our check stands, and within a few minutes, Ryan Stiles walks in. Unbelievable. Regular guy, wears blue jeans, sneakers, and a casual shirt. Really nice too. I was hoping I'd get to help him just to see if he would say something funny, but my friend did instead. About 7 years ago, I was still in high school and living with my mum, my brother, and my younger sister. My parents got a divorce about a year and a half before, and my dad kind of screwed us. My mum was unemployed, but going back to school with less than a year of schooling left. She was 48 at the time. We had no money, no food, no nothing. We've always been a poor family growing up, so it wasn't anything new. Unfortunately, we couldn't live where we were living anymore and had to move. This was the first move without my dad, so it was kind of the toughest. I remember day after day, my mum would cry wondering how she would feed us, move the house, care for us, get money for bills and other things. I remember asking her what we were going to do or how we'd pay for anything. She had no answer. She went to get the mail a day after. She always avoided the mailbox because of bills, and when she did, she found a letter with a check in it for $6,000. She was employed at an insurance firm where she'd met my dad some 20 years earlier, and as a perk for working there, you're given stock options. My mum forgot about the stock options, and they tracked her down 20 years later to give her the money, and single-handedly saved us from being homeless. My mum made that $6,000 go a long way. We happily moved to a cheaper home and everything is okay again. We were at a poker table playing poker once and I was winning $100 to $150 from my mates. The dealer was next to me and he was like, "Man, you're totally cheating." He was joking, of course. He was dealing the community cards and I was like, "Next card is the 3 of spades." Next card was the 3 of spades. Best moment ever. When I was a kid, every time I thought about a certain episode of The Simpsons, it was the one that would come on that evening. For example, I would imagine a scene or joke from the one where Lisa gets braces, and it would come on. I thought I was psychic, but I never could use my power for good. Sometimes I pretend like I have a bazooka. This happens when I'm in the car with my girlfriend on our frequent and boring 4-hour trips to home and back from college. Well, one time I shot my imaginary bazooka at a car in front of me. A second later, his tire blows out and he swerves off to the shoulder, staring at me all the while. He was probably as confused as I was. When I was about 8 or 9, my family went for a walk, driving our huge 15-passenger red van to the path. Mind you, this is a small walking path in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about except for our family and a few quad riders. For some reason, when my dad closed the door of the van, I got terrified that someone would steal our car. Obviously, none of my older brothers or sisters wanted to listen to a whining 8-year-old. After the walk, we came back and, as guessed, the van was gone. Disappeared. After filing a report with the local cops, we got rides back home and waited. Turned out the thief just needed a way to drive a few friends to an amusement park. The van was found a week later in the parking lot of Kennywood. One night I was stargazing while being outside for a smoke and saw a shooting star between 2 prominent landmarks. A few days later, I was outside again at the same spot and I remembered the shooting star and thought how cool it would be to see it again. A few seconds later, a shooting star crossed that same spot. Oh, and one time I predicted a joke on 2.5 Men. That isn't that hard though. You're not wrong. I don't think I saw a single funny or original joke in the one time I was subjected to that awful show. Come at me, haters. One time about 10 years ago, my buddy and I were about 15 or 16 at the time. We were standing on his front lawn waiting for my mum to pick me up when we heard a guy screech his tires and spin out on the top of the road leading to his house. Looked like he was trying to do donuts. We both looked up there thinking it was a car accident about to happen, but it was nothing, so I said, I got excited. Would have been great to see that guy crash into a pole, for some cheap laughs. This guy couldn't have been moving faster than 10 miles an hour, so it would have ruined his day and nothing more. The guy straightens out and drives down the hill and then completely loses control of his car and slams it into a telephone pole about 30 feet from where we were standing. It was hair-raising. We still laugh about it to this day. Another one was about this guy I knew a while ago. He wasn't such a bad guy, but he had an abrasive side and he liked to rib me for a lot of little things. At first I didn't mind so much, but after a few months of it I got pretty tired of him. My friend brought him up in conversation one night in front of a bunch of people, and as a show of disapproval of him, I said, if he died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Well, guess what happened the next morning? He died in a motorcycle crash after some butthole doped up on pills and driving on the wrong side of the road nailed him on a blind turn. I still feel crappy about the timing. Sat outside college with some friends when several police cars appeared very suddenly, surrounding a car in the middle of the road and forcing them to stop. One of my friends said sarcastically, "Watch, they'll get the automatic weapons out next." Now, this is the north of England. It's not all that often you see the police wield any sort of firearm around here. But sure enough, 6 or 7 officers arose from their vehicles with MP5s and pointed them straight at the back of the car they'd stopped. They dragged a man out of the car and put him in the back of one of the police cars. One of the officers got into the car they'd stopped and they all drove away. The whole thing lasted about 30 or 40 seconds, and we were all sat about 10 feet away. On September 11th, I said to a coworker, wouldn't it be crazy if another plane hit the tower? I was at the game in 1998 that Kerry Wood struck out 20 batters. After he struck out the first hitter in the first inning, my friend looked at me and said, well, only 19 more to go. By the 9th inning, we had our entire section going insane as we counted down the last 2 strikeouts to 20. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.